Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome in. This is the Pigskin Profits powered by TDN, the daily news down here in good old Cowlitz County, stretching far and beyond its necessary reach. I am your host, Nick Sisson of N2 Media, on the left side of your screen, and joining us, our co-hosts. On the top right corner, you know him as Recruit Radar Pacific Northwest on X or Twitter, Tyson McCallum. And then in the lower right corner, Coach Devin Recker, formerly of the Washington Community College men's basketball team and a good contributor for Red Zone, good sports writer. So what's up, gentlemen?
Hey, how's it going? Ready to kick this thing off?
Ready to go, man. What about you, Dev?
Yeah, excited to be here.
So for those who don't know, we did this last year. We did it on Twitter, now the artist formerly known as Twitter. Elon, thank you. So we've decided to move this to a live stream platform, which you are watching right now. We got it streaming on a few different avenues. It is still going on Twitter and then YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch as well. So if you haven't followed our pages yet, make sure you do so. We will be doing this every single week. And what I'm referring to, of course, is talking high school football in the state of Washington. And folks, we do have a live stream chat section available. Your comments, questions, feedback is appreciated. Your comments will appear on the screen that you're watching on as well. So have a chance for us to see it and talk about it, have some internal conversations about what you type on the screen. So guys, let's just jump right into it here real quick. Last season was a lot of fun for me, at least. Just getting a chance to get to know some of the great athletes that the state of Washington has to offer and watch them compete on the biggest stage there to close out last season. We had a couple of undefeated teams battle it out for state championships in the 3A class and the 2B class. 3A was the unforgettable Yelm versus Eastside Catholic championship, not quite walk-off, but almost walk-off. When Ronquillo ends up recovering an interception and rips it out of the defender's hand and takes it to the end zone for the go-ahead score, which proved to be the winning score. And then Napavine and Okanagan, two undefeated teams heading into last season's 2B championship game. That was a two-score game, but both of those teams looked very, very good throughout the entire year. That was a game that we all had kind of circled at the beginning of the season. So I think that all in all, we did a pretty good job on last year's predictions. And then, I remember all the way back to last year's show, if we go to the 4A class, Lake Stevens was a topic on everybody's mind, especially because of Jaden Lemar. He's gone. His brother, Jay Sean, is still there. So, Lake Stevens probably isn't going away this year, but they played a very close game in the 4A state championship against Kennedy Catholic. So, I was really, really impressed with what we saw last year in the championship games. There really weren't any blowouts. I felt that every game was fairly competitive, and I'm really looking forward to this year. Tyson, what were your thoughts on last season?
We had a few matchups that I think, you kind of just talked about a little bit, but Lake Stevens, Kennedy Catholic, I don't think anybody probably had that tabbed at, say, week 0 of the season. Lake Stevens was a favorite, but Kennedy Catholic wasn't necessarily – I wouldn't say they were in the top few selections for most. Yelm and Eastside Catholic kind of thought it'd be one of those two, plus maybe O'Day obviously in there. Then Linden and North Kitsap, you had the number 1, number 2 seed. Played a great game. North Kitsap, probably one of the best defenses we'd seen in the 2A class all year. And then Linden, they're as well-rounded as they come. Mount Baker, obviously, another surprise in 1A.
10 seed.
Halfway through the season, you may not have thought they were even getting in, and then they go on a roll, and Marcus George is just running through everybody like, nobody's business, and also outpicked us in our playoff brackets last year, so shout out. And then Okanagan and Napavine. I think that's one a lot of people had penciled in to start the year probably.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Devin, any thoughts on last season at all before we start to jump into this year?
You guys touched on a lot of it. I think that last year was really exciting with Mount Baker, and I think up here specifically for the NWC, that three-way tie for the 1A, it was really fun to have them have that shootout, and then go for those two spots, and then see both of them go to the semifinals was also super fun too. But you guys touched on all of it.
Yeah, last year provided us a lot of really good moments. I was really, really happy to see that finish for that Yelm Eastside Catholic game, just from a standpoint of like, it's such a storybook ending. It's the type of ending that you could really write and direct a movie about. It's Yelm's first ever state championship. You do it against a team that has a ton of history of winning championships in Eastside Catholic since their inception. Super happy for the guys from Yelm. And, if we want to transition that into this season, I think that Yelm is without a doubt going to be considered probably the favorite in the 3A class. Tyson, I'm going to go ahead and put your 3A rankings here on the board, but
yeah, let's pick them apart.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm starting here in 3A as we roll the ticker on the bottom to show you Tyson's preseason top 10. I ultimately went kind of back and forth with this one, guys. I don't know how you feel on this, but I feel that 3A is probably the most competitive when it comes to the amount of teams that could end up winning the championship trophy. I think 4A is very close to 3A in that regard as well. I think there's quite a few 4A teams this season that are going to have a chance to win the trophy. We'll get a little bit deeper into 4A here in a minute, but I wanted to start with this classification super deep every single year. If we want to go through the rankings real quick, Tyson, why don't you just go ahead and take us through the teams that you got 1 through 10 here?
Yeah, well, first I put Yelm, obviously state champions. They lost a few good players, but most of their key guys and core guys are back. They just have a complete team and pretty much some all-world players down there as far as high school level gets. And then O'Day, honestly, if you start looking at O'Day's roster, it's like 6'8", 300, 6'4", 300. Like it just goes down the line. And I mean, even sophomores, that Schwerzel kid's what, 6'4", 250 defensive end, got offered from Michigan. Eastside Catholic, we know they'll be reloaded. I know a few of their guys down there, not quite as many as I do on the other two rosters, but it's just a given that they'll be there towards the end. Bellevue, I think, will have a bounce back year. They didn't have a bad season last year. They just had a really brutal schedule to start the year, and everyone's like moving them down the rankings real quick because they're 2-2 after week 4.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of good players. Garfield, a couple good transfers. Specifically Rashawn Clark from Federal Way, committed to Cal with his new quarterback, EJ Kamenong. They have a lot more good players than that too. Both the Witherspoon boys are electric. Monroe, undefeated until last week of the season last year, basically. They have a good quarterback themselves. I think, they should have another good season. They're in a position to win that league again. Kennewick's always got a great defense. Mount Spokane showed promise last year. Stanwood, obviously losing pound for pound, probably the best running back in the state last year, Ryder Bumgarner. They got his little brother, and they got a couple other kids that they should be able to do that by committee. And then Lincoln might be the most talented of any of those 5 through 10 teams in terms of total guys. Only reason I have them down that far is you don't often lose a quarterback to the SEC, and their best running back is over there playing in the 4A with Emerald Ridge now. So there's other teams you could have put on there too. Week 0, crapshoot. That was my logic though behind everything in the order that they go in.
Yeah, just to kind of comment on the teams that we got where they're at currently. I got no problem at all having Yelm at number 1, especially based on the fact that they're going to have arguably the best two-way player in the state, leading the way again in Braden Platt. They got a plethora of other guys that are going to do some things for them this season. So I'm very comfortable with that. And I actually really like with where you got O'Day. I think O'Day at number 2 is probably the right spot. You could go back and forth between them and Eastside Catholic and Bellevue in my eyes, especially if you look at last season's results. Eastside Catholic beat O'Day twice, once in the regular season, once in the postseason. So heading into this year, you're like, well, why would you have Eastside Catholic behind them? And I think it's just due to the fact that the top end players that O'Day has on their roster were mainly juniors and underclassmen, and that starts with Jason Brown Jr., Sir Keenan Hart. The running back room is probably the best in the state 3A class when you talk about those two guys right there. Just looking at Bellevue at number 4, I think that Bellevue has probably the best junior class out of everybody with their class of 2025 graduates. And then they've got a good problem to have at quarterback. They got 2 very reliable options in Lucas Resor and then Riker Moon. So they're set for a deep run, and their schedule that they had, last season, like you just mentioned, Tyson, that really kind of put them through the ringers there in the early parts of the year. And they only had a 1-point loss to Yelm in that semifinal. I really think that I wouldn't even call this a bounce back season. I mean, if you think about that, they're one score away. Although Lincoln kind of had them, in the quarterfinal matchup that ultimately ended their season. I think that, Lincoln's probably maybe a little bit better of a roster, than the 10th spot. Other than that, there's a lot of unknowns. I feel like that, Kennewick is a team that has consistently produced some good defenses from the Tri-City area. And, with the other teams, Stanwood and Monroe, that, like you mentioned, they are in position to win their leagues. Not the most competitive, although Ferndale did handle Stanwood last year and their matchup. I think that Ferndale is probably the next best bet when it comes to, possibly winning a league championship in their mind.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, just a side note, you're talking about Bellevue's 2 quarterbacks. Resor, he just won that strongest arm competition down there at that maximum exposure camp, chucked it 65 yards. Hose. Yeah. There's some exciting quarterbacks in this class. Ilona, he's got his twin brother to throw to at Yelm. Don't know as much about O'Day's. Eastside Catholic, obviously new starting quarterback. He's a ranked recruit. I'm not even going to try to say his last name, but I think his first name's Jake. Kamanong. Then you got Springer. Kennewick's going to have a new starting quarterback. Obviously, last year we got to see Andre Breedlove. And Mount Spokane's quarterback, Devin, I don't know if you remember his name. I feel bummed that I don't, because it's one I had on my mind about a month ago, but he is a great player too. And then Stanwood, obviously wing T, but Lincoln, the reason I brought up quarterbacks, I said they lost an SEC quarterback, but they have an outstanding looking freshman coming in. Sione Keho, I think is how you say it, but if that's wrong, I'm sorry. But he looks mighty impressive, about 6'3", just throwing ropes in 7-on-7 at that maximum exposure camp. So it's fun to, I love looking at quarterbacks across each one of these rankings, and it's definitely heavy influence on it, but still at the end of the day, we know that doesn't always carry you to the end.
I believe that Mount Spokane quarterback TJ Haberman.
Yeah, that sounds right. He had a great year last year, and he's really got Bodie Gardner to throw to, so another good player over there in Mount Spokane. But yeah, anyways, there are definitely quite a few teams. I'm not trying to transition to this yet, but I've got about 4 or 5 teams circled down there as dark horses that aren't even in the top 10, or probably weren't even top 15 thoughts for me originally.
No, that's a great spot to kind of transition to, I think, because it speaks to the depth that the 3A class has. When you look at up and down the board, they're going to have 20 teams end up getting an opportunity to get to play in the round of 16. So it's a good place to start. Auburn's a team a couple years ago that did some really good things. That league, I think, produced 3 teams that only had 1 loss throughout the regular season last year. I just mentioned Ferndale. They don't appear here in the top 10. I think that they're a team that has always got the ability to go on a run and get themselves in position to possibly make it to the semifinals and beyond, beyond the Jake Locker years. Like, you got the jersey for Jake above your head there, but shout out Jake Locker, Ferndale. What do you guys think about, the teams outside of the top 10?
I think I'm really interested to see. You guys are really, I don't know if you're high on Ferndale or what. I'm really interested to see how they are, because losing 2 Power 5 recruits could be really, really hard, and quarterback Bishop Utsi is not, on the tall side, and he's so used to handing the ball off a lot, and they do a lot of wing T action, but I'm interested to see who's going to be running the ball and who will be the main ball carrier. I believe they have Connor
Walker.
Yeah, he just got an offer today, I believe, right?
I think he committed to Eastern today.
Committed today, yes. Congratulations to Connor out there.
Yeah, be interesting to see how they use him.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with you on Auburn, though, too, Nick. I don't know if that was your prime example, but what's funny is I've seen, it predicted 3 different ways for that league: Auburn Riverside, Auburn Mountain View, and Auburn, like different people picking each one. But those Valchin, I believe they're brothers, that they have. I mean, Lukens, watching him catch balls, and he looks like he's DK Metcalf or AJ Brown out there. Like, it's like a man. Yeah, they could be dangerous. I had them on mine. Couple other teams, I'll just run through them and see if you guys have any similarities here, but to pick off from Spanaway Lake, they have some dudes on their team, that Darian Clemens, and then there's another kid that plays in their secondary. I don't want to mess his name up. I got too many similar names running through my mind, but Timberline also looks like they could be loaded again. And then don't sleep on Rainier Beach. They have a lot of good athletes on that team.
Sure. Yeah. Rainier Beach is definitely a team that you kind of always got to watch out for, a school that always produces good athletes and very competitive, good coach with Coach Sampson there too. So, I mean, a very tough league. That league is super hard to finish in the top 2 in. I mean, it's one of those leagues where if you finish second, you should be impressed still, because it's very difficult to get to that point when you got, O'Day and Eastside Catholic, and you got Garfield as well. So definitely Rainier Beach is one of those, teams. I wouldn't really call them a sleeper, but I mean, because they're going to be circled on every team's schedule every single year. So hard to sleep on something like that. The same league that you just mentioned with those previous teams there, Peninsula and Gig Harbor, they're 2 programs that, have really turned the corner over the last couple of seasons and been very competitive. Gig Harbor was in great position last year to pick up a opening round win in the playoffs on the road against Kelso. Unfortunately, they blew like a 27-point first half lead, which is kind of unheard of, but the day was a tale of 2 halves. It was pouring down rain for the first half, and then it cleared up in the second half, So, those are a couple teams in that league that are going to be hardened by having to play Yelm throughout the season. So I like teams that end up coming in late, a chance to do something down the stretch. Southbridge was one of those teams last year that found a lot of success heading into the postseason. And again, it just speaks to how deep the 3A is a team like that can get hot and ride some momentum into the postseason, just gets shellacked in the round of 16 on their way out. But, also down here in this realm of the world, Evergreen of Vancouver has got a couple of nice players that they are going to kind of be competitive with. So they got a tight end that's committed to go to San Diego State. They also have an offensive lineman, I believe it's Fox Crater, if I'm remembering correctly. So they're a team that's got some dudes. They're going to compete for a Greater St. Helens League championship. The Kelso Highlanders down here, just mentioned them a little bit ago. They did graduate Connor Noah and Judah Calixte, the running back room that they had, along with some other important pieces. But they have their most important piece back to their 2 most important pieces, probably. They got their quarterback, Tucker Amrine, And then they've also got Peyton Stewart, obviously, and Peyton just flipped from, Northwestern for obvious reasons, to go to Oregon State. And I'm not Peyton. I'm not going to speak for Peyton, but talk about two situations, you're going to commit to one and then, something happens to where, it's probably makes sense to not go there. And then it happens again pretty much to where you could review and be like, okay, it might make sense to not go here either to Oregon State just because, there are only one left. And, so yeah, Kelso's got a couple of guys there. I'll be interested to see what Mountain View does with Mountain View losing a couple of really good players from last year's team, Mitch Johnson being one of them. But those are a couple of teams that might be able, in Evergreen and Kelso to do something down in this area. But no disrespect, for those in the local area that are, tuning in here tonight. By the way, you guys can all type in your comments. If you got teams, if you got players to watch, type them into the live stream comment section and we'll get to them here and read them out loud on the screen. But, the competition level from this area and these leagues down here versus, some of these other places in the state, when they end up matching up with one another, it's really kind of a no contest in some regards, and I hate saying that because you always want to believe that every team has got a chance to win every time that they take the field. But, the difference in competition is just kind of night and day. Yelm was the team last year that we were all kind of still on the fence, like they're blowing everybody out throughout the regular season. And you're just asking yourself, you're like, okay, what's going to happen when they take on X team, when they take on a team that perennially has dudes? And they found themselves in two, dog fights, and they ended up having to win close games to where they had to dig deep and pull something out, so Yelm was kind of that first, I'll say, smaller school to kind of crack through and break the mold of what we're used to in 3A. So it's not like it's hopeless for a small school to build a culture, to build a program. I saw that there was a post recently for Yelm football that, they've gotten to the point where they're turning out 90 guys, to go to work, So if you're getting 90 guys out to your program to get on a roster and play football and strap up your helmet, so to speak, I mean, that speaks volume to the culture, speaks volume to the coaching staff, getting everybody to believe. So it can happen anywhere. Thoughts, concerns, questions?
Oh, I don't know if Devin's got any teams. He's, obviously we've hammered on quite a few, but yeah, I mean, as far as a new breed of culture, it looks like they've got a lot of younger kids coming up in that Yelm program too that are going to be pretty dominant players themselves. But no, I another loss that area took, Union. They lost a great coach, very well-respected coach that was kind of put Glacier Peak on the map originally and then went down there to Union and went back up to Glacier Peak to be the AD as of this summer. So that's another hit to, that I guess you're speaking on teams in that league. So, but no, I pretty much covered my guys, and I'm interested to see if Devin's got any teams we didn't talk about yet.
Yeah, you guys covered a lot of them. I think another team that could be decent is Lakes. I really like Legend. Galai, I don't know how to say his last name exactly, but I think he's going to be really solid and have a really good year. But yeah, you guys covered most of them. I agree with most. Are we going to say our predictions, like officially?
We'll save them for the end.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Then I have nothing else.
Cool.
Yeah.
What else, Tyson?
Oh, nothing. But I was just going to add, for 3A, I think starting with what you thought to be the deepest class, it just shows how long of a conversation it can be. How many teams you can talk about validly.
Yeah, I mean, and all we're really going off of is, what we saw last year with some of the top guys coming back. I will point out real quick, one of the most interesting things about this season is that if you look at the schedule, it's virtually identical for most every team from last year, other than the sites have flipped because, kind of like how college sports does their non-conference scheduling, the state of Washington kind of does it the same way, to where you're going to get a 2-year deal type thing to where, you're going to go play at one school one year and then they're going to come turn around and play at home the next year against the same opponents. So, the matchups that we saw last year, we don't see them very often, but like Nooksack Valley, a 1A school, hosting a 3A school in Mountain View last season, they're going to do the exact same thing. The venue is just going to flip. So, we're going to see a lot of the same kind of looks that we saw last year. Maybe the results might be different because the venue changes, but it's a pretty good idea. At least I got a pretty good barometer, I think, about how things went last year and where they could be heading this season as well. So that'll be something for everybody to look forward to. I was thinking 4A next, since it's, if we're thinking that 3A is the most competitive, and I'm going to give 4A its love, put the 4A rankings up there on the ticker for everybody there. But I'll just run through them here real quick. Again, preseason rankings from @Recruit Pacific Northwest on X. Graham Kapowson, the favorite, at number 1, and then the defending champs Lake Stevens number 2, Emerald Ridge number 3, Kamayakin number 4, Skyview number 5, Mount Si number 6, Bothell 7, Chiawana 8, Sumner at 9, and then a surprise, Moses Lake at 10. Tyson's all on Moses Lake at 10 there, so I'll let him explain that here in a little bit. I'm actually not upset with the Graham Kapowson being the preseason number 1 in your eyes here, Tyson. So that's 2 straight classes that I really don't have an issue with there in terms of who we think number 1 is. Big reason why is transfer and firepower. They got all kinds of firepower at the quarterback, wide receiver positions. They're set to put up a lot of points this year. And their MO a couple of years ago was just up front, being bigger than everybody, pushing everybody around off the offensive and defensive lines. But, they've got a real threat at quarterback and at wide receiver.
Yeah, definitely picked up Malachi Durant and already had Jabez Woods, Chris Norris, Noah Flores. They got some good running backs too. I can't even start to name them, but always a program that honestly at this point has got to be known for probably the most consistent quarterback play over the last decade of any school we've seen in Washington. So, they're another one that kind of sputtered at the start of the year last year, kind of like Bellevue, has the pedigree of Bellevue in the last decade or so. And it was only because that league was so hard last year, but still found themselves, in it pretty late in the season. And I don't know, they seem gassed up and ready to go.
Yeah, the other thing too is their league super tough. Every game that they play is a league standings game. And if you look at who they're going to run up against, it's kind of one of them. It's kind of one of them deals to where like anything can happen on any one given week. It's a league to where as long as you finish high enough to get in and get a semi-favorable seed, anything can happen. You look at Sumner, you look at Puyallup, a couple of teams there that are also going to be very competitive this year. But, quarterback, Super Alice, Jabez Woods, guys that have been there before and are going to do big things for them this season as well. The next team that you got in line is the defending champs, Lake Stevens. Lake Stevens, they really didn't lose much in terms of total players off of last year's team. And they have a state championship in their back pocket now to go with it. So, but they do lose Lemar, who ends up going to Oregon. He's going to wait for his younger brother to show up there in a couple of years. And, he's got big shoes to fill, but I think that Lake Stevens is in a good position. Their league is not large. They've only got 5 teams in the league to compete with, and 3 of them are going to be kind of, I'm not gonna diss on them, but they're probably not going to be very competitive. Devin's shaking his head like me there. Yeah, I know. Glacier Peak's the next in line. How about that? We'll just go with that. Kamiak has.
It'll be solid. Yeah, Kamiak will be solid.
Kamiak has arguably, one of the better athletes in the state. Tiandre Waverly. Yeah. I mean, probably. I mean, well,
yes,
I think that I think there's some good players. That's for sure. I'll say that.
Yeah, I agree.
What's his name? Tyson there. Sorry, what's his name? But he mentioned Schwarzel already, a guy who, as a freshman heading into his sophomore year, has already got offers to Michigan and offers to UW. I mean, you won't see him as much on the offensive side of the ball, but Waverly, without a doubt, probably the best wide receiver in the state. And I saw some comparisons on Ford's Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it, about him being compared to Reggie Williams and his numbers and such like that. So, I mean, if you're in that ballpark, then you're a very good one. What's up, Dakota? Thanks for commenting in. Appreciate you watching. But anyway, your head's thoughts on Lake Stevens this year?
Devin, what do you got?
Yeah, I think Lake Stevens is going to be solid again. I think they're definitely a top 3 team. Colton Matson's back as well. Solid quarterback. Like you said, Lemar, they got linemen back. Of course, like you said, the league is very winnable.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, put it at that. Yeah, we're going to touch on some other teams as well. I really like Emerald Ridge myself, especially adding Dixon at running back. And, Jake still has his targets, and Gio and Tony Harst out there. So that's another team to watch. Yeah. I also like Olympia, but, losing Cam Downing is unfortunate. I think they would have been a lot better with him, obviously, having all the targets around him. But I think Drew Carlson is going to step in, just fine. And they're going to be really dynamic because he has a lot of targets that he can throw to. And, he can move with the ball well, I think. I did want to ask Tyson a little bit, though, about Moses Lake. I do like Brady J. I think that's his name.
Yeah, stud little quarterback, coach's kid. I said he reminded me of Johnny Football a little bit, and obviously it's a large comparison, but he only got to play in a handful of games as a freshman last year. And I think, I've talked to a couple of their coaches. He's really going to elevate their team even further. And you're talking about a team that was one crazy – I mean, the other craziest play besides Kyler Ronquillo's grab and nab on the way by was the technical fail Mary with Moses and Eastmont last game of the year. That was to get into state, and I believe so. And he might correct me if I'm wrong on that, but they thought they had won. Already had kids on the field, I believe, and then Eastmont throws like a 60-yard Hail Mary down the right sideline. Kid catches it in the 5-yard line, walks in. Moses had just thought they won, but they got to do one more play off of a penalty. But they have – we're going to talk about them a little bit further, just to touch on the other two in comparison. Lake Stevens got to break in a young quarterback last year and happened to win a state championship. And then Moses Lake, got to introduce this kid to the varsity game a little bit, and he played all through summer ball with the older kids. He's won the MVP at the Eastern Camp 2 years in a row. He can really sling it, always has his eyes downfield, can pick up some yards with his feet, but he has some targets to throw to too. I mean, these aren't kids that are going to be ringing the name buzzer like the Graham Kapowsin kids are, but Kyson Thomas, Joel Middleton, both are quick as can be, 5'9", stout. They're not just slender little 5'9" guys. They're going to break tackles. They're going to play both ways. Got a sophomore. Shoot, I should go back and look, but Demarius, I think is his first name. He's 6'2", wide receiver. New transfer running back from Vegas named Tommy Ransom Jr., probably one of my all name lists for the All-State.
Better than Diesel Wilkinson?
Yeah, he's on there too, and we get to 2A. But no, he's a stud. They got a big side of their right side of their offensive line is big and mean. So I think they have all the pieces to really take that league and maybe surprise some teams. They're still, Kyson and Middleton are both seniors, and they're probably two of their biggest, I'd say, key players. But the rest of their team is essentially Uribe is a senior too, the right tackle. But the rest of their team's pretty young and talented. And that coach, he used to be the head coach of Monroe, so he's kind of moved around and good guy. I've talked to him. I've talked to their running backs coach, and they think they've got a team that's pretty poised to have some fun, win some games this year. Maybe they don't necessarily deserve the top 10, but I think they have talent that is worthy of being in the top 10 as far as what they have potential for.
Well, we're talking about Moses Lake too, real fast. I want to just shout out Braden Cast. He's the offensive lineman there, class 2025. He's awesome.
He's the right guard. Yeah, plays next to Uribe, and they're both about 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", 260, 270 plus. Uribe is closer to 300 pounds, but Cast moves really well. They both get to the second level on their blocks and punish people. Yeah, they got pieces. I mean, there's plenty there.
So if I hear what you're saying correctly, it's that you don't think that they're top 10 right now, but you think that they'll end up in the top 10 scenario.
I think they have. I'm just basing it off what I see on the rosters for the most part. It doesn't really matter to me what you did last year, but I would say most people, if they were to make a top 10, wouldn't put them there. But they definitely, from what I see, roster potential, they're deserving of being in that top 10 teams in the 4A class for sure.
Did you mention Kyson Thomas as well?
Yeah, Kyson Thomas and Joel Middleton. Those are the two 5'9" slot outside guys. They both play in the secondary. I think one plays safety, other plays corner. They might just move them around depending on matchups. But
they have a really good incoming freshman coming in as well.
That running back?
Wide receiver, I think. Outside linebacker.
Elijah.
Rathbun.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And then there's an Elijah. Gosh, I should have wrote all their names down. It's hard to – granted, it's hard to remember the rosters in full detail. Yeah. But no, he looks like a stud too. Ransom kid, he played like 5A Vegas ball. And
yeah, he looks really good.
Yeah, definitely. So their defense might give up some points, but they're going to score. So you better have a game plan to stop them because they can beat you in many ways and kind of run that spread. Their head coach spent time with he went over to hang out. He hung out at Mississippi State, knew a guy down there that was a coach, learned Leach's offense there, and went over and was at WSU and, kind of just hung around the facility, learned Leach's offense there too. So they very much so try to model their play after that, which should produce plenty of points with all the weapons they got. That quarterback, he could be, I mean, not as a sophomore, but as the time he's a senior, we'll get to players of the year candidates later, but he looks like he could just tear it up.
Yeah, I got a chance to see Thomas and Jay last year on the basketball court in the Fort Vancouver Trapper Invitational. Jay was very crafty, very shifty, a good athlete. He made my all-freshman team. And, Thomas was another kind of like a bulldog type mentality player, a little undersized, but, definitely a guy that was not afraid to stick his nose into tight situations there. So, by the way, kind of got a soft spot in my heart for Moses Lake, with the whole, Mavericks Chiefs deal going on there with their logo and their garb, so to speak. So, standing strong. The Chiefs live on.
Yeah, Kyson Thomas, I said Jay won the quarterback MVP at that Eastern camp. Kyson Thomas won the overall camp MVP out of 16 other teams there, and there were some good teams playing there that weekend. So, not a name that everybody knows about because he plays over here, but people will know who he is by the end of the year.
He's the real deal. No, yeah, he's the real deal.
No doubt.
I'd like to welcome everybody once again to the Moses Lake preview show here. I love it. Sorry. But everyone's going to know Moses Lake by the time this show's over with. That's for sure. Not just a destination to travel to when you want to go see a concert.
Got that right.
Just don't go swimming. That's the only thing you need to avoid.
I'm sorry. I love you. I hope I'm making friends in Moses Lake. I know that you guys are. That's for damn sure. So,
Yeah, hey, it's where I was born. I got to show some allegiance to them. Plus, they're only about 15 minutes away.
Oh yeah, for sure. So let's just dissect a couple more real quick in the top 10 and, kind of get your thoughts on some teams, and then we'll dip a little bit outside the top 10 here. But, not to put you on the spot and question you or anything like that, but Skyview here being at number 5, to me, that's like the biggest like eye opener, to where it's a school that has some athletes, and, they play in a winnable league, and they won some games last year against some good teams, but they also lacked that killer instinct, and they've lacked the ability to take the next step as a program to work themselves deep into the postseason. I'm not saying that they don't have good talent, but they have found themselves on the short end of the stick in the Greater St. Helens 4A league for, quite a few years here with Camas and Union. Two very, very good programs, albeit last season, those two teams probably would admit that they had kind of down years for their standards. Camas is a team that perennially schedules 6A competition from Oregon, to fill their non-conference slate. Skyview does have a very dynamic wide receiver in Gavin Packer, but, they're a team that has a rivalry with Columbia River in Hazel Dell down here. And yes, Skyview ended up winning the game last year, but River gave them some trouble in the first half of that game. And I just look at them and I say to myself, do I really believe that they're the number 5 ranked team in 4A going into the season? No offense to the Vancouver, brethren to my, south here, but I just don't see that quite yet. I mean, I could see them down in Moses Lake territory here, but what are your guys' thoughts on Skyview?
I just wanted to add to Trey Jacobs. I think he's, top 5, top 10 running back in the state. What I noticed about him last year is they had a lot of sophomores and juniors playing on their team. And I think those other teams are going to be down. I talked about how Union lost a great head coach, and like you said, they both kind of had down years last year. But honestly, for me, once you get after 1 through 3, I think you could throw 15 teams into 4 through 16. It's like just start moving them around. You're like, I don't think there's any significant team that really stands out amongst the rest of my rankings, and like a few sleepers out there that are for sure a lock top 5. I really think the top 3 here is about the only thing you can lock in overall. But I like Skyview's potential also, just seeing how young their roster was last year.
Yeah, James Poindexter, the quarterback, he's going to have a great year. That's the main reason I really like them. And Gavin Packer, like you said, he's going to catch anything in his area, and James will get it there, I think. That's why I really like Skyview as well. I'm with it for the top 5.
That's okay. I'm open to the I'm open to the possibilities.
Pick it apart, Nick. Please do. It's fun.
No, yeah. I'm certainly not.
No,
I'm coming.
I'm serious.
I'm coming with a very realistic position here. All right. Like,
no, you got to get some rationale in here.
I mean, I'm looking at the postseason from last season. All right. I don't see Skyview. Okay. I'm not saying that, all right. I'm not saying that they're not going to get there. I'm not saying that they don't have the athletes to potentially get there. I'll say this, when we are doing the shows at the end of the year and we're at playoff time, listen, I have an opportunity to cut all this up on video. I will put myself front and center for everybody to see me call out Skyview and be like, number 5, my ass, show it to me. Right. And I will eat all the fucking plate of crow that you want to throw at me. I tell you that, because I have no problem rooting for Skyview. It's a team that I played up against when I was younger, and Skyview became a school, I think, my freshman year. So, I have no problems with Skyview at all. I hope that they represent the Greater St. Helens League very well. And you're right about the players that they do have. I just, a lot of the things that I base everything on is like a prove it mentality. Show me that you've done it before and that you can do it again and that you're building in the right direction. Because, Camas as a program has proven it to me over the last 10 years. Union's another school that's proven it to me over 10 years in that league. So that's the only reason why, I'm coming with that energy. Like I said, if the Skyview fans are here on the chat and want to type in, where I can go, where I can.
Let me save you real quick. Let's
Please.
just run over their schedule real fast last year.
I got it pulled up.
So, okay, a 3-point loss on the road to Jesuit. I mean, we all know who Jesuit is. They have to play him again this year, week 1. So we're going to learn a lot about him again.
Tough.
Yeah, tough, but 3-point loss. Other game they lost, Camas, 3-point loss, 36-33.
And they blew that game, by the way.
30 plus on Camas is.
Yeah, and then they go and they knock Puyallup out of the playoffs, and then 42-28 to Graham Kapowsin. I mean, with a team that's mostly sophomores and juniors, I love that. And frankly, let's just look at who Jesuit was last year. Lost to Wes Lynn, 31-20. Quarterback, I believe, is going to WSU. Was their heralded recruit, as far as I know. And then lost in the playoffs to eventual state champion and probably the most dominant team in Oregon last year, Central Catholic, 23-20. So you look at those losses Skyview has, and it's like, I get where you're coming from as far as like past pedigree and all that, but then all these other ones, 26-6 over Union, 39-6 over Battleground, 41-7 over Kentwood, 51-0 over Heritage. Granted, those aren't, big name schools, but 2 other schools actually one we haven't talked about yet, but there is 2. Kamiak, 48-20. Granted, that was a down year for them last year. Columbia River 41-13, and they also beat Bothell in week 3, 28-10. So, yeah, I love their schedule from last year.
Game, by the way, that game against Bothell, their bus broke down on the way up there. So, or they had really bad traffic. One of the two, I don't know. They were late getting there, obviously. And the rule in football: you're late getting off the bus, you're getting blown out. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. They won some games last year. I'm with you. I'm just saying we're talking number 5 here. All right. I mean, we're not talking about on being the precipice of the top 10 here. I mean, you're saying that this is the 5th best team. That's all I'm saying. All right, now welcome everybody to the Skyview season preview.
Oh my gosh! I'll just add in Max Preps has them at 7.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. I'll settle down. I'm gonna take another drink of my always down IPA.
The only other team in my top 10, I think, that had a better season last year is probably Sumner at number 9. And Kamiakin had a pretty good year too. But yeah, I don't know. I couldn't make a case for Mount Si's got some dudes. They're gonna be have a kind of a year of recent memory.
Eastlake?
Bothell. I don't have Eastlake on here, actually.
Ooh.
That could be one team that I slept on, but they kind of were, I mean, not to ruffle any feathers, they were kind of disappointing last year too. I think everybody had them like top 3 to start the year, and
yes,
they fell down the ranks. I think Bothell's going to bounce back big time. Their new quarterback, Jalen Viars. Do you remember where he transferred in from, Devin?
Shorecrest.
Yeah, looks like a stud. I mean,
he is a stud.
You watch his film. He can throw the ball from all different angles. He's only going to be a junior this year. Chiawana, they've been solid. And
see all that's a team right there. Chiawana. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Yeah, DJ Duran.
Yeah. Well, they had a really strong season last year as well. I mean, they were, I think, the last remaining undefeated team in 4A, if I remember correctly. Right?
Yeah, and it was Duran's first year starting too, so he's got year seasoning under his belt.
And they've won a state championship before, yes?
They have. What,
Absolutely.
3? Yep. Was it? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they have to be in the top 10, but most people down there, different league, but a lot of teams are really high, people are really high on Kamiakin overall in that Tri-Cities, Lower Valley of Yakima area.
Real quick, to Eastlake's defense from last year, that league turned out to be a lot tougher than I think people thought it was, because you mentioned that Bothell Skyview game. I think at that point people were like, oh man, the league's kind of down this year. Oh, Eastlake, they got handled in their first couple games. It's like, so I think that league Skyline ended up being, I think, the best team out of that league last year with Robinson, but their defense ended up being really stout. So it was a pretty competitive year overall last year for 4A.
North Creek was good in that league too.
Yeah,
they could be another. Yeah, they could be another good one on there. SPSL is going to be just as deep this year too, as far as deep leagues go. I was just going to kind of unless you guys want to hammer on any of those other ones. But SPSL, Bethel and Curtis are both going to be very tough outs this year. Bethel's probably got the best overall defensive player in the state, I would say. Zadrius Rainey Sale.
Yes.
Kid's only
have like a top defense in the whole state.
He said that today to John. John Manley. What's crazy? He's a junior, and he last year as a sophomore he was 14, wrecking havoc on defenses.
Wow.
And he's a 15-year-old junior. I mean, talking about that's a man child right there, and they've got another big guy that. Yeah, big offensive lineman, defensive lineman that plays both ways. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. It's a long one. But Curtis too. They're going to be – Rocco Koch is probably one of my favorite quarterbacks as far as just watching the way he plays the game.
Matt Evans from Evans Rankings, who we're all eagerly awaiting what his computer thinks, he can confirm Kamiakin is going to be nasty this season, so – looking forward to what the Braves have got in store for everybody. Yeah, I think we've really hammered a lot of 4A out here in the early going, and obviously we got some picks, and we've mentioned some players throughout as well. Do you guys have any teams outside of the top 10 here that we probably should be looking out for when it comes time to season's end?
I just touched on my two, Bethel and Curtis, but I don't know. What do you guys have to say about that one? Besides Eastlake, obviously.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anyone to add other than I already touched on Olympia earlier as well. I think that, it's going to be hard with a different quarterback in Drew, but I think he'll be able to hold his own. They play in a very tough league as well, so that's also hard, but it's a team that I think, could be a little sneaky.
Yeah, I'm satisfied with what we've got here so far in the top 10. Outside of, Union and Skyview and Camas, there really isn't a lot of 4A action in this area until, you do get up to that South Puget Sound League. And I think that we can kind of all agree, I think, maybe a 2 out of 3 majority here, that the SPSL is still the best league for 4A, top to bottom, and the most competitive. And, if there was a league that I think that rivals it, I've mentioned it before, but the MCC with the hybrid league with the 3A teams that are really good over there, Kamiakin, Chiawana, Kennewick, Southridge, Richland, you're going to get some teams over there that are going to be competitive 1 through 5, 1 through 6 every single year. Other than that, if there was a team outside the top 10 that I would be looking at as a potential dark horse sleeper, I would definitely be going with Kennedy Catholic. They really didn't. They're another one of those teams like Lake Stevens. They really didn't lose too much. I really don't know why we haven't dubbed this the Kennedy Catholic season preview, because I think that they've got, a lot of guys that are going to continue to do great things for them. They did graduate Banuelos last year and Alexander, but they're a team that plays in a league that they're, kind of similar to Lake Stevens. The team that they just played, they're going to win it. They're going to finish first in their league more than likely, barring some, injury setbacks or some unheard of run, from another opponent within. But, they're going to put themselves in position to enter the postseason, in my estimation, with a 1-loss record, maybe a 0-loss record. Their first, I think it's our second game is coming up here against Highline, but they start out with a game against a school from Colorado, Regis Jesuit. So, I don't know much about Regis Jesuit other than it's in Colorado, but we'll see how that goes for them and what kind of a benchmark that might provide for us for a little bit of clarity. But like I was talking with Tyson earlier, the second name in the high school is Catholic, so that means that they have the opportunity to pluck some guys potentially or get some guys to their program. And a state championship loss by 2 points seems to be a pretty good building mark if you are going to, pitch to some kids to come to your school. I think that they're going to be a team that's going to be competitive and find themselves in pretty good position come postseason time.
Yeah, I agree with that one as well. They're one of my contenders. I think Devin Forehand is going to be really solid, and Derek Coleman Brusa, who's a 2026 O lineman, D lineman, he's gonna be a monster as well.
His brother looks pretty good too. I think it's offensive line mainly, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's another team I like as well.
Yeah, and that game of theirs against that team from Colorado is going to be broadcast, so Saturday. So we could watch it probably if we want to. Unless you guys have any other 4A stuff, we might as well look at. Okay, yeah, let's look at their week 2 game because this is my number 10 team on my 2A list, Highline. So that's, they're going to go. I think they played each other last year. Kennedy Catholic took it to them pretty well.
They kind of did.
But Highline gets to play Rainier Beach week 1. One of the teams we talked about is a 3A school. But, yeah, I've got them slotted at number 10 in these 2A rankings, which I assume will be the next class we move to.
Yeah, let's go ahead and throw up the 2A rankings because I'm sure everybody's sick of the 4A. That concludes the Moses Lake and the Skyview 4A season preview. Devin's shaking his head.
You're a funny man.
Is it because I'm a clown, Devin?
No, of course not. Never.
Oh, sure. It's okay. I get it. I don't know. What's that word? Antagonist, I guess, by heart. I don't know. That's why I do these podcasts.
Every show or radio or podcast, whatever, has to have a contrarian, Nick. That's your job.
Makes it better.
No. Yeah. My job is to be right and to be articulate. So that's what I'm after. No, like I said, I'll blow it up when I'm wrong. I don't care. I love being wrong. That's great. I've lived life for 39 years somehow. So
hey, I might be dead wrong not even having Kennedy Catholic on the top 10. So whose head will we really hang here? We'll see.
That's okay. So
if Moses Lake's there in the end, you guys owe me something,
bro. We'll go right back to the Moses Lake preview show and be like, look at all you guys here, and everybody loves you. This side of the past. So yeah, we love it. On your bottom of your screen now is the projections, the top 10 for the 2A classification. Guys, I'll just say it right now. This is my favorite class to dissect, obviously, for a lot of reasons. I watch more 2A sports than any other sports. It's primarily, what my backyard is here in Longview and in Southwest Washington, and had a chance to go do a lot of stuff last year with Eli Sports Network and the NFHS live streams for the state tournament. Got a chance to watch a lot of 2A basketball. So I've seen a lot of the athletes in the 2A class over the last few years. So we'll start it out with the obvious. Although, teaser for you, not sure it's so obvious, but the number 1 team, the two-time defending state champion Linden Lions, come in at numero uno. So, no surprise there. If you ask me, I think that that's a layup in terms of what they've accomplished and what they deserve to start out the season, ranked number 1. Right behind them, Tyson, you've got Enumclaw of Buckleytown right behind him at number 2. And then North Kitsap, number 3. The Anacortes Seahawks fly in at number 4. Then the Othello Huskies sandwich there at number 5, right in between number 6, Washougal from here in the Greater St. Helens League. And then Tumwater comes in at number 7. Number 8, the Cubs of Cedar Woolley. Number 9, WF West. And number 10, the Highline Pirates, led by Deontay Cooper, former University of Washington running back standout. We talked about competitiveness, and I don't think that this class is not too far off this year. I think this year is actually going to be way more competitive than years past for some reasons that may not get everybody too excited, but I think that there's a little bit more of an even playing field in terms of talent up and down the board here in 2A. And I think you're going to have an opportunity to possibly see some teams that aren't ranked currently in this top 10, maybe even, threatened down the stretch. But initial thoughts from you guys watching the live stream, type into the comment section what you're thinking about the preseason rankings. Tyson, explain yourself.
Well, Linden lost a lot of key seniors last year, but one thing we do know they will have is a great quarterback who, even running the ball, he gains 3 to 4 yards every time just falling forward. And they're going to have another great offensive line. I mean, Gatterman was out for some of those playoff games last year, and they plugged a 300-pound sophomore in there, and it was just like duct tape over a leak, held just fine. Enumclaw, I think, had – this is just going out on a limb kind of, but I think had the seeding broke down differently last year. That's the state championship we probably would have seen anyways. I think Enumclaw beats North Kitsap. That's just my 2 cents of what I watched last season, but primarily because I think they actually have, well, I can't say the best quarterback because obviously Washougal's got Holden B, the one kid with a Division I offer, but Tracty has everything that you could look for a quarterback. I'm not sure why he doesn't have any bigger offers than he does. They've got just a great culture there. I told Nick their fullback who's going to get more of the carries this year, Seamus Toohey. He's like, I love Friday Night Lights. He's like Donnie Billingsley. He just runs people over recklessly. Rugby player, So they've got some targets to throw to too. Big 6'5" tight end, etc. North Kitsap, obviously, we know why they're there. They're in the state title game last year. Great defense, great team overall. Another good player that your favorite player, Nick, Logan Sloman. There at North Kitsap. Anacortes.
Love Logan Sloman.
I think Anacortes he's a great player. 9 interceptions last year. Anacortes is a team that lost Hayden John, commit to Idaho, lost a good lineman in Garrett Bickley, but they pretty much return everybody else. And Othello, honestly, I don't know a ton about their roster, but they were just tenacious last year. And I expect them to have a tough team again. They might be the team I feel like is too high if I was going to pick one of my own off my own list, but based off of how they played last season, I thought they were deserving to still be mentioned. Running through the rest of them, Washougal, strictly based off their quarterback, see if he has a huge season. They should be in the top 6 to 8 teams. And then Tumwater and Cedro. Obviously, Cedro pounded them last year in the playoffs. That score didn't reflect that game at all. I think they scored 13 points in the last few minutes to make it a close game, but Cedro manhandled them in that game, and they lost a few guys too, but maybe have one of the pound for pound, one of the best players in the 2A class in Karsten Reynolds. And then WF West lost their quarterback, but they're replacing him with probably the best athlete in the 2A class, Gage Brumfield. Played wide receiver last year, and if you watch them play, he was in on every tackle on defense and then making plays all over the field offensively. And then Highline, playoff team last few years. We know they got plenty of talent. We love their coach. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see what you guys would change or, for that matter, move on to or include the teams that maybe are off the radar that shouldn't be.
Start with you, Devin.
I like your top 10. I think maybe Othello might be too high, but as you said, again, I don't know too much about them. I do love Cedro Woolley as well. Another team that I like that might be like not a top 10 team, but like sort of a team to watch out for is Seaholm. They had freshman quarterback Nolan Wright, and then I guess he's going to be a sophomore. And then Andre Watson, I think, is arguably the best receiver in Whatcom County, maybe in the NWC as a whole. But I guess we'll talk about this later. But the 2 bid
Yep.
it really sucks. But that's a subject we'll touch on later. But I do like them just as a team to watch. I think Prosser as well, not just a team to name that's not in your top 10. I also really like Archbishop Murphy. Archbishop Murphy is a team to keep an eye out for, just because I think they've added a lot of talent, and they're really young this year, but they're going to surprise a lot of people. And I think next year, the year after, they're going to be one of the top teams in the entire state.
Yeah. So, my initial thoughts on the top 10, obviously how I led in, I have no problem whatsoever with Linden being number one, very deserving 2-time champions. Culture, probably the best in the 2A class. Like you mentioned, with guys go down, you plug somebody else in and they don't miss a beat. The drum just keeps on going. So I really think that despite them losing every senior on, I think they've only returning 3 starters on both sides of the ball this year, if I'm correct. I think total of 6 returning starters from last year's team. Right. And then Enumclaw at number 2. I kind of think that that's a good spot for them personally. I do go back and forth with them and North Kitsap and Anacortes a lot. I am kind of with Tyson a little bit on the idea that maybe if the seeds went differently last year, you might have seen Enumclaw against Linden in the championship game. Although it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, because you're going to have to beat Linden at some point in the postseason to get there. So, I don't mind too much about how things went there. North Kitsap had a loss going into the postseason last year, whereas Enumclaw did not. Seeding breakdown, it can play somewhat of a part there, but again, you're going to have to beat somebody that's really good anyway to win the championship there. And I got no problem with Enumclaw being number 2. I think North Kitsap is definitely a team that has arrived and has staying power. They've got one of the better defenses in the 2A class. And like you mentioned, Logan Sloman earlier, I love Logan Sloman. I personally think that he's, the best wide receiver in 2A. Watching him against Anacortes last year in the quarterfinal game, he was consistently finding, openings in the secondary to get, himself available. And, watching all the huddle film from him last season, I mean, just an absolute machine in terms of route running and concentration and catching the ball. Anacortes at 4. See, now I'm saying that I got no problem with these other teams here, but Anacortes is one of those teams to where they've also had that culture shift to where they are now going to be one of the teams that starts to turn out more and more players each year because there's a culture identity to what they've got going on there. Coach Ports ends up sliding out of the head coach position and slides into the athletic director position there. So, having a new head coach can sometimes, be a little bit of an adjustment period. But, Tyson, if you want to talk a little bit about the new head coach, or Devin, if you guys want to talk about him, I knew he was on the staff last year and, probably won't miss too much of a beat, but, Tyson's got a couple of family members that play on the team there. So.
New head coach is Travis Anderson, who was their O-line coach last year. I think maybe like the run game coordinator, but played college ball, snapped the ball for Mahomes in minicamp. So he's a guy who's played the game at high levels, and I think he's done a great job with their line. I know just this year at that Lakewood 7-on-7 tourney, their offensive line group won the offensive line competition against teams like Lake Stevens and I think Bothell and a couple other of those southern bigger schools. So that's promising. They're returning their biggest guy in Kyle Leisman, 6'5", 305. Osquedas, it looks like he's filled out even more. So really, they lost Bickley, who was a great mauler on that line, but seeing him take over, most of their coaching staff stays intact. They did lose our our buddy Kwame, I think Bowens was his last name. We had him on the show briefly for him, and Travis actually joined us last year briefly for a couple minutes. So, I think a lot of things are going to remain the same. Tyler Dubuque, their quarterback coach of last year, moves up to offensive coordinator. So for the most part, and I'm sure Port still has some heavy influence there as well, still just being the AD, but maybe not being on the sidelines. He's probably still pretty involved, I would assume.
So yeah, despite the turnover, some of the things that you just mentioned there with winning the offensive line competition at the sevens, and it kind of takes out, when you do 7-on-7, obviously most everybody, who's going to be watching the show knows exactly what the format is and what they're going to do. But, you're really removing, what Anacortes' bread and butter really is in terms of running the football with Brock and Brady Beaner. They're a team that arrived 2 years ago, even though they did not really compete in the state bracket. Last year, they had their opportunity at home in the last season, or last game of the regular season against Linden. Ultimately fell a little bit short in that game. This year, they'll have to go on the road to Linden on the last game of the season, but I think that they're going to be in a really good position, when we get to that game there, to possibly learn from last season's quote failure. And they might actually be a team that wins the league this year. And we were high on Anacortes last year. For those that were with us last season in week number 1 in our show, all 3 of us said that we really liked Anacortes, and they weren't in anyone's top 10. So, believe it or not, we do know a little bit of something around here when it comes to the dark horses and the teams that, are about ready to turn the corner. Right after that, Othello. Othello is graduating, a healthy couple handfuls of players from last year's team, but they're going to be playing in a winnable league. But outside of playing against Prosser, that's their main game that they're probably going to have to be concerned about this season. But steady diet of running the football. They're a system high school, so they're very much a plug and play contender in my eyes. I'm kind of more leaning on Devin's corner of the screen in terms of that maybe being a little bit too high for 5. But, I don't know who you really put above them. If there was a team that I would put above Othello that's below them on the list, I immediately look at Cedro Woolley. I think Cedro Woolley is borderline top 5. They're a team that is returning a lot of players from last year's team. They were fairly young overall on their roster, and they get Linden at home this season with Carson Reynolds leading the way. I think that the Cubs are in, a really good position. So I think that they're a team to really watch out for in terms of being a competitor for, getting into the playoffs. And we'll talk a little bit about that and why that's important here in a little bit. I wanted to just highlight a comment here from one of our watchers, Jake Moe. Washougal at 6 is a surprise for me. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the Panthers here. We've already mentioned their D1 quarterback recruit, Holden B. They've also got a really good wide receiver, Sam Evers. Those 2 guys have hooked up often throughout their high school careers. If you look at Washougal, though, from last season going into this year, I don't know how much they're going to grow and develop, because they played the number 4 seed from the EVCO last year, Shelton, in the crossover game, and Shelton gave them every bit of trouble that they possibly could. It was a 1-score game, and they had to go back and forth with them throughout the entire night. And, EVCO was a league last year that I won't say it was down, because WF West had a really good season, but, the benchmark on what we saw with their second best team, Tumwater, going up against Cedro Woolley in the playoffs, like you mentioned it, Tyson. Cedro Woolley kind of put the screws to Tumwater in that game there. So, and then Washougal loses to the team that you got ranked at number 10, Highline, in a 1-score game. And, they're ranked 4 spots below here. So, 6 for Washougal to me, it seems a little bit high on the surface, right? But I'll say something real quick that's going to support them being at 6. Tyson, I absolutely think that they will be in position to be a top 5 team by the end of the year in the rankings, because I don't see them losing maybe a game in the regular season. You know, they're not going to run into a tremendous amount of competition all season long in the Greater St. Helens League. There is a team in the Greater St. Helens League that I do think is on the precipice and is a sleeper and a dark horse. I'll get to that in just a little bit when we talk a little bit more. But what are your, like, I guess, thoughts in terms of Washougal maybe above a team like Cedro, maybe above a team like Tumwater, and maybe above a team like Highline?
I think just looking at it from Highline is probably up there with offensive weapons. I'd say they're pretty comparable teams. What put them ahead of Highline for me was quarterback play, and that Ronan Rasmussen's no slouch, but two-way quarterback doesn't often go D1 out of the state of Washington. It's happens every so often, but obviously he has all the tools.
Washougal.
What's that?
It's especially at like Washougal.
Yeah. And so, Holden comes from obviously a very athletic family. I think all of his siblings have played at Idaho, and maybe even his parents. I don't know about that. But targets wise, he's got 2 receivers being looked at by Idaho and Eastern, and a very eager third receiver that's ready to make some plays too. My concern with Cedro Woolley is I kind of looked at them like the Tim Tebow Denver Broncos last year. Like, Tebow had his guy and Demarius Thomas, and Carson Reynolds had Jaden Lee, I think it was. I think he's crab fishing now, graduated. But he was like his go-to guy last year. Had really probably the most speed on their team outside of Reynolds. Lost him. And otherwise, they went as Karsten went. He was beat up there for a few weeks, which caused them to lose some games. And with how much he has to do on both sides of the ball, I just see some of those other, like a team like Washougal having a little bit more depth than Cedro Woolley does, despite all the young players in their program last year. But who's going to step up to help Karsten production wise? Tumwater, I really do like their new quarterback that they're starting this year. His name's going to escape me. I'll have him down by week 1 or 2 for sure. But he looks pretty impressive. And, that was first year coach last year. And then WF West, like I said, they might have the best athlete in the class on their team. And as far as, depth of their run in the playoffs last year, they lost Gavin Fugate, but I actually think their offense will be more explosive with Brumfield getting to touch the ball every single play this year instead. So overall, Washougal, those teams, it's the pedigree of the quarterback and what he has to throw to.
Fair. Devin, thoughts?
Yeah, just to add in real fast, I think Caleb Hall, he's a receiver at Cedro Woolley. He's going to be a senior. He's like 6'3", 180. I think he's going to have a big year. He'll probably be that go-to guy, I assume. I mean, I don't know what their offense, but he's one guy I think could have a really good year that Karsten can really rely on.
Yeah, it'll be nice for him to have a big target like that to look out for. I mean, 6'3" wide receiver in the 2A. They can run in a straight line. They've usually done pretty good damage for sure. I don't know anything about him as a player, but thanks for that input, because that's good. That's a good note to have on them as the first few weeks start unfolding. I'm sure we'll see that connection light up the board.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think Washougal is in the right spot. I like them that high just because what you guys were talking about with Holden, But in my eyes, I think the top 4 is kind of just there, and I think that top 4 is right. And I mean, you can probably interchange them, but I don't think that would change any of them.
How about teams that we don't have in the picture here ranked in the top 10 that we think can make that run? Maybe, I don't know about state championship, but who can maybe ruin somebody's season and take a couple spots?
Devin brought up Seaholm. I just wanted to throw that out there again. They played everybody in the NWC as tough as anybody did last year. Just came up a couple games short. But, Anacortes obviously lost to Linden. But for the first 2.5, 3/4 of that game that Seaham played at Anacortes, they dominated them, frankly. I mean, they pounded the ball, and they were going on like 15-play drives with a freshman quarterback that, when he needed to throw, he could make some completions. It wasn't too much part of their offense. They'd kind of go between like the wing tee, more of a motion offense to also running a spread shotgun formation. And it seemed like he really excelled when they put him back in the shotgun. I assume they'll probably do that more even this year. And then the other two I had on here was Columbia River and Stalakum. Columbia River picked up a quarterback from 1A. Was it Castle Rock, maybe?
No, Kingsway Christian, Braden Schiffer.
Yeah. He looks pretty outstanding. And Stalakum's got some good players down there. Looking at their roster, I don't know about the quality of talent with their size guys, but they have plenty of them that were 260, 270, 280 across the board. So they should have some meat. And they got some good skill position guys. And, it was just 3-4 years ago that the best receiver, maybe not named Marvin Harrison Jr. in college football, played there in Emeka Egbuka.
So I think that despite Highline's first two games, which they could end up losing both of those games because it's against really good teams in Rainier Beach and then against Kennedy Catholic, I think that they're a team that when it comes playoff time, they could be ready to take the next step, the next step. They've made the playoffs 2 seasons in a row and went out in the quarters the last year and the year before, round of 16. So, they're a team that has ran into Squalicum and then Linden in back-to-back years. Those are, one of them's an eventual state champion in Linden, and then Squalicum, they went all the way to the semis, and they had a couple guys that were on, the Washington State Cougars the next season, and Smithson and Schlenbaker. So, I mean, they've gone up against some really, really talented teams in the postseason the last few years. And, I think that they're probably going to be in pretty good position when they get to the postseason. So, I mean, they're not outside the top 10, but they're right there at 10. And I like what Coach Cooper has brought to the culture. We had him on as a guest last season. With, kind of mirrors, what you look for in Yelm and what you look for in Anacortes and teams that, didn't have the guys, didn't have the turnout, didn't have the weight room commitment. And, it has the parent support. Those are all huge factors in building a program. So I think Highline is right there on the precipice. A team outside the top 10 that I like, I'll let you jump in here in just a second, Tyson. Sorry to cut you off there, but I really, really, really think that the Woodland Beavers are sneaky and lurking in the weeds here in the Greater St. Helens League. For those who don't know, they got a coach by the name of Sean McDonald who, won back-to-back state championships just a few years ago for the Calamus Chinooks. Last year was year number 1 being the Woodland Beavers head coach, and he took that team to the postseason in year number 1. And they have as talented of a running back down here in the Greater St. Helens League as you'll find in the state in Elijah Anderson. Their defense is going to be quick side to side, and they will probably be one of the better coached teams in 2A this year. When you think of really good coaching down here in this league, you immediately think of Sean McDonald and you think of Scott Rice of Ridgefield. Those are two coaches that know how to build a program and go about their business. So I think Woodland is one of those teams that you could find them ending up in second place in the Greater St. Helens League. They do play Washougal in week 3. So you're going to get that early season matchup out of the way. They may endure a loss to Washougal then, but make no mistake about it, they are going to grind teams out this entire year. So I think Woodland is definitely on the sleeper list. And if they do get a 2 seed, that means that they would wind up playing, a 3 seed out of Evco in the crossover round. That will probably look like a Black Hills or an Aberdeen or a Shelton more than likely. So those are a couple teams that I got outside or fringe top 10 or outside my top 10. Columbia River, I think they have the athletes, and I think that they have the culture. That it's a proud school, and we'll see how Schiffer does with them. Ridgefield lost, another one of those really good wide receivers that we're talking about. They lost Landon Kelsey, who ends up transferring to Central Catholic in Oregon. And he's a guy that's getting looked at D1 schools. They got a good quarterback room, and like I said, they got a good head coach. They'll be competitive in Greater St. Helens as well. Just a couple years removed from a loss to that same Squalicum team that Highline lost to in the quarterfinals 2 years ago. You're kind of digging deep beyond that. So,
yeah, definitely. I was just going to touch on, we were talking about great athletes, and we'll probably go through our player of the year stuff later, but the kid we didn't even name amongst all those schools, who's probably the best two-way athlete in the state at Highline, Marquand McCraney, 4-star athlete, committed to Cal, I think 2 weeks ago, along with Rashawn Clark and Kamanong of Garfield. So he's a kid that I know is getting looks from Oklahoma and stuff last year, even as a junior. So, there's it surprisingly, looking at this player of the year, just kind of as a teaser for later, I've got about 11 kids written down, and shows how deep the 2A class is of talent that's widespread. Where with some of these other, 3A and 4A classes, I had a hard time getting past, like, say, 5 that I thought were real great examples in those classifications.
Devin, anything to add there at all? Or are you good for?
Yeah, I just want to touch on just one more. I mentioned that earlier, Archbishop Murphy. I think that's another team that could really surprise a lot of people. That's outside now in the top 10, and kind of, I believe they went winless last year, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, so I think that they're going to have a huge year. Jack Sievers is a 6'5", 215 tight end outside linebacker. They have a new quarterback from Canada coming in who's going to be a senior. His name is Jovan Shocker. Also, Isaac Smith plays quarterback for them, and he's pretty athletic. They got a 27 athlete named Javin Lada, who's like a quarterback hybrid, also like can make plays for catching the ball. Hakeem Smalls is another big offensive and defensive lineman who has an offer from Nevada to watch for. And, I just think that's a team who, no one is going to be watching for. Kind of like how we were talking about with Anacortes last year. Archbishop Murphy is going to have not as good of a year as Anacortes, but they're going to be that sort of similar type of team in my eyes.
Yeah, and then they bring in Ryan Clary onto their coaching staff. Yeah, they definitely should be on the rise for sure.
Yeah,
that was one that one of the Anacortes coaches said, if you're going to come watch a game this year, come watch the Archbishop game.
I remember back in the day when nobody even wanted to play Archbishop because they were so good. So,
exactly.
They're not a school that's ever had problems getting guys to turn out and play, and they develop talent too. They got a good winning culture. Last year was probably the worst year in program history in terms of their record and what they normally put out there. So I'd expect nothing more, Devin, for them to hit the lab and do what they can to bring kids in. The second name in their school isn't Catholic, but it's the same concept. Go out and get some guys and bring them in and improve your roster. I will say this for athletes for 2A, like, here in the Greater St. Helens League, I'm excited to see what junior Tremaine Jenkins is able to do at quarterback for RA Long, a team that has been struggling for the last few seasons. They're on a little bit of a losing streak here, but for those that have seen Trey over the last couple of years, he's an outstanding athlete, and the kid just continues to grow and really fill out. I've used the term man-child describing him, since he was a freshman. That he is a man-child, and he's going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting at the quarterback position this year, but he's a guy who can make a lot of plays happen with his legs. Last year, he was a wide receiver. I think he caught 9 or 10 touchdowns as a wide receiver. just an all-around athlete. If he's able to, get some support on the offensive line, and if they can get some support running the football, he's a guy who could have his name, tossed into being a dude that's looked at to play, college football, but he already is getting those looks as a defensive back. It's going to be tough to play both ways, to play a quarterback position. And, he's been first team all league as a corner the last 2 seasons. So just an all around great athlete and a good kid, 4.0 student.
Just another guy I want to touch on as well. It's going to be really in a similar position to that in the 2A class is Marcus Nixon up here at Squalicum. He'll be playing the quarterback position as well, even though he'll be, he's a natural running back, natural playmaker with his legs. But from what I've heard, he can deliver a decent ball, 10, 15 yards. And I think that's all you may need. I don't know what else is around him, but there's just another guy that will have a lot on his plate as well.
Yeah, if we're going down that pathway, his team probably won't be up there. It'd probably be similar season, more like Squalicum, be around 500, I would assume, based on their competition. But you already named him earlier, Diesel Wilkinson, another kid that's stuck at the quarterback position. That's just absolute freak. Jumps like 43 inches and 4.4, 4.5 vertical guy, or 40 time guy. Going to go play at Idaho with Holden B.
All right. So we'll talk a little bit more 2A in a little bit down the road here. But, we've been doing a pretty good job of sticking on each class for about, so far the 30-minute mark. We got the 1A class to get to, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the playoff allocations for a certain league in the 2A classification here in just a little while.
And 1A. And just as screwed in the 1A.
Oh, see, Devin, I asked that question to you earlier. I think that I thought there was a reduction there too.
There is.
Yeah.
We go from 2 to 1. Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, look at this. Oh, my God. All right. So come on back later tonight here just a little bit. I know it's getting late, but it's summertime, so buck up. 1A. So let me flip the ticker here real quick. But the 1A class, this is another, I'm so excited for how competitive these leagues really are going to be this year. There's going to be a lot on the line in 1A coming up this year. And we got the top 10 now on the board here. Your defending champion, Royal of Royal City, a team that was written off for dead after they lost at home to Linden Christian last year. Hard to write off the defending champs, but now they're 2-time defending champions. They come in ranked number 1 on Tyson McCallum's preseason top 10. Right behind him, you got the Nooksack Valley Pioneers, one of my favorite names in all of the state of Washington. I love the Pioneers. It's a great name. Then you got coming in at number 3, Toppenish. Number 4, LC Linden Christian. Number 5, Kings. Number 6, Cashmere. Number 7, Lakeside. Number 8, Montesano. Number 9, La Center. And number 10, Godzilla. So, we got the teaser here for everybody on, the playoff allocations. It's going to play a huge, huge factor this year in the NWC. I'll say this much, that I think Nooksack is in the right spot here at number 2 ahead of Linden Christian. But Linden Christian does have an incredible 2-way athlete in Jeremiah Wright playing quarterback and also playing on the edge. Nooksack Valley, they got Joey Brown, Colton Lentz, correct? And so they're going to be a very, 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 very good team to deal with there. Beyond the top 4, it's hard for me to, I'm not going to say take these other teams seriously, but I think that 1A is probably the most top-heavy of the classifications this year. What are your guys' thoughts?
It's funny because I completely disagree. I think it's actually probably one of the I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them.
Ooh, spicy.
I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the deepest of all of them. I think it's I think if I was going to choose, it's the de If I was going to pick one team to pick on the most in my top 10, it'd be Toppenish. And we kind of talked about this off the air, but losing Josh Perez is a big loss. He was
Absolutely.
do-it-all guy. And after further, review, I just basically finished going through every team and every league in the 1A class and posting players to watch. And if there's two teams outside of my top 5 that I could easily put up in the top 5 after review further, is Kashmir and La Center. Both of them looks deep. They have a lot of guys that just play football. They'll hit. There's a kid from Kashmir, Joshua, I think Morose is his name. Go watch that kid's film. Like every single tackle, boom, like just nailing guys. It was like he was using a hit stick there was no wrapping up. Kids went flying. And he was one of about 7 guys that I highlighted off that roster. I think there were 6 guys on the center's roster that I was really high on too. And they were a team that even played Nooksack really tough last year. Didn't they lose they beat, who was it? They beat Mount Baker on a last second field goal.
They were down like 21-0 or 20, something like that in that game. And then they had the old onside deal workout. They play again. Mount Baker's going to make the trip down here to La Center to take them on.
Yeah, like I was saying, basically, I think if I was going to redo this, the things I would change is maybe bumping Toppenish and Kings down a few spots and moving Kashmir up to say 4, and La Center and Kings would kind of be a toss up for 5. But overall, Lakeside's going to be good. They've got, you could ask Cole Hunsker himself, probably our favorite guest last year, as far as his outgoing nature goes. Calvin Mickelson is going to be a problem to stop. I don't know if you've seen that kid, but he's built, and he does not look like your average 1A, especially quarterback. Kings has plenty of talent. Montesano was a tough team last year, returning some good starters. And Zillow was a team that scored points on some people last year. And they've got some big kids, and Jaden Solom was just his first-year sophomore quarterback that put up big numbers. So, I feel pretty good about this top 10 overall, but I do have quite a few dark horses, a few teams on there that I think, after further review could easily be mentioned in that lower spot ranks of the top 10 as well.
Devin, what do you think about where we got the team slated at here on the top 10 ticker?
Yeah, I like the 1, 2, 3, 4. I think Nooksack above LC makes sense. I really like Lakeside as well. I think a team you might be forgetting is Tenino. They played Mount Baker really hard, and I think they have a lot of solid returning talent.
New head coach
right?
now. Yeah, I just saw that they just had their coach step down not too long ago and just named somebody else. Where's Skip Smith when you need him here?
Yeah.
I will say about Tenino, the only reason I left them off is when Spicer went down last year, so did their offense, and he graduated. Yeah. So they were heavy consideration, between the Montesano, La Center, Tenino. I feel like it's kind of like the NWC with LC, Mount Baker, and maybe especially last year, LC, Mount Baker, and Nooksack.
See, in my eyes, I don't think Mount Baker is going to be as good. I don't even think they're even in that conference, especially if there's one bid out of the NWC and the 1A. I don't even think they have a chance. If you ask me, a Meridian might be a team that could be sneakily better than them up here directly. I really like Justin Elmer. He's in the backfield all the time on the defensive side of the ball. He's solid linebacker, solid running back as well. I think Jaker Fife's going to have a great year as well. He doesn't have as many targets, but it's another team as well. I think another team also you don't have in the 1A is Bellevue Christian. I think Caden Kivett, he's playing the quarterback position, but he's an athlete. I think that they're going to be a fast, quick team.
That Tristan Drummond kid's a track star too. I don't know if you've seen him in the open field, but he just runs away from people like they're standing still on Bellevue Christian.
Yeah, I like LaCenter Tyson. LaCenter's going to play a couple tough teams, from the 2A class right away. They're going to play Hogginson. They're going to play Woodland. Um, they took on some tough competition last year. They ended up losing to the team that you got ranked 6th here in Kashmir, which makes a lot of sense to have Kashmir ranked above them currently. So I think that both of those teams are taking steps in the right direction in Kashmir and in LaCenter.
I'll say Kashmir. The thing I like about them is, Nooksack Valley, Royal, obviously super physical team. They probably will be till the end of time. Nooksack's got some dudes, Ackerman and John Stremler. That dude, these biceps, I bet you could bust out a tape measure and it's bigger than some kid's waist.
Oh yeah, he's a big guy.
Yeah, they got some physical maulers, and that's the thing I liked about Kashmir too, is just watching all their different players that they have over there. They all run and hit, and they like to block. And I mean, I'll save it for later, but I could easily see them being, I could easily put them at number 3 even on this list, despite them being down at number 6. My dog's breaking in. Sorry, guys.
Let the dog in.
Yeah, it could be like Marshall on Joe Rogan's. Just he'd come lay down, but I don't want him unplugging anything.
Nice. Yeah. If I was going to go through the list, then I would say a team that, might be a little bit up there. I think Toppenish is probably a little bit above their actual pay grade by the time the season ends. Losing Perez will prove to probably be, a big factor in that decision, at least on my end. Other than that, I don't have a tremendous, feel for, all the other teams below what we just talked about with Nooksack and Royal and Toppenish there. So, all right. Excuse me. Woo! Linden Christian. So, Kings is a team that, they're going to play Nooksack again this year. That'll be a great non-conference game. Very much looking forward to seeing how real they're going to be in the spectrum. But, they took on Nooksack last year, and it was a fairly close game, but Nooksack ended up beating them. So, but the Knights are another one of those teams that have the ability to reload and to get some talent from outside of their area.
I will also add in that they have one of the best offensive lines, like regardless of class, in my opinion. They are big, they're talented, I think, so I like Kings as well.
Yeah, they got a great coach too. I don't know. From a theoretical standpoint, Jim Shapiro, one of my favorite follows, I think, on Twitter, actually.
Me too.
He's always got something great to post. But, dark horse teams off the radar. 2 that I wrote down immediately I've already touched on were LaCenter and Kashmir, even though they are in the top 10. But I'd very much consider them real threats. Looking at, because my top 2, Royal and Nooksack, I think they're the cream of the crop, but I don't think those other 2 are too far off. And then there's 3 off the radar teams that I don't know if anybody might pick these, but after going through every single team in 1A and in every single league so far, I've got 3 that really stood out to me. Granite Falls, they have a transfer quarterback, Caden LaPlante, who was backing up Colton Matson at Lake Stevens the last couple of years. He's going to be a senior, and just watching some of his summer ball, 7-on-7, the way he flings it around, I think he should have a big year, and he's got a really good receiver over there playing with him. Name escapes me off the top of my head, but Seton Catholic looks like they're going to be pretty good too. They've got 6 or 7 guys that are notable. Obviously, the offspring of Jason Gesser there. He was a freshman last year. He's going to get to play quarterback again in his sophomore year, and they have a good athlete in Joe Palarame, I think is how you say his name. He was the quarterback before Gesser took over the reins, but they kind of use him everywhere. He's an all-league player. And then one more from over here on this side that, after further review, could end up shocking some teams is LaSalle out of Union Gap. They have some great athletes that it looks like some good team speed. They've got some size, that South Columbia Athletic Conference is with the East and the West breakdown. There's a lot of tough teams in there. You got Toppenish and Royal in here. Connell's notable. LaSalle, it'll be a stiff competition, but they have a pretty deep roster as well. I loved all three of those teams the deeper I looked into them.
Yeah, I like the quarterback that Castle Rock has, who is going to be a sophomore this year. His name is Stephen Ibsen. Talked a little bit about Ibsen last season as a freshman. He's more of a run-first guy, and when he does throw the ball, he's a threat off of play action because of his ability to run outside the pocket. You're going to see a lot of direct quarterback keepers from a guy like him. And, Castle Rock is going to be, one of those sleepers. They're a team from Trico that is probably going to finish first in their league, maybe second in their league, and get themselves in playoff positioning. They're the same league with Le Center. So, that game is going to end up being, probably the bigger game. Seton Catholic, like you mentioned, they're a team in the same league there. So, 4 playoff spots available from the Trico, not to rub it in the NWC's face there, but that's kind of asinine. Eatonville. Eatonville's a team that I think is kind of going away. Not like they are going away, but no, they're not being talked about a little bit here. They still got Kai Nation on the roster. They did lose Joe Kralik last year, and then they lost their big tackle that they had was like 6'6", 300 pounds, but I think that Eatonville's a team that is going to be slept on this year. And like we talked about before in the last couple of times that we did the show last year, is that that Tenino, Montesano, Eatonville three-way there, it does rival, the Northwest with Mount Baker and LC and Nooksack Valley. So, anything can happen, and they get 4 playoff bids, I think, as well. So, we'll see how it ends up shaking out.
Yeah, and on that league, maybe the best player in that league is from Kingsway Christian, Ryan Charlton. It's a deeper league than it looks like on paper originally down there in the Trico. I will say about Eatonville, though, just to touch on that, they were another team that last year we talked about them a lot. We thought they'd probably be the most physical team, in the 1A class. They had 2 300-pound linemen, had a fullback that was 6'3", 240. Job Kralik was probably he's probably the best running quarterback in the 1A classification last year. But new head coach, losing 2 300-pounders, one that's a big commit to Boise State. They still got Kai Nation. They still got Dylan Norman, both excellent players. But it's tough to lose 600 pounds off your offensive line and expect that same, physicality to be there the following year. But can't sleep on them. We might have to get Skip's insider info. There may be a few kids we don't know about still.
Oh, I'm sure we'll get DM'd if we're missing out on anything.
If he was watching, he'd probably be all over me right now. Love Skip, though. He's a good guy.
Anything else on 1A that we want to talk about, whether it's teams or players?
No, not unless it's, we're talking players of the year candidates. But, I think we touched on everything I've got, unless Devin thinks of anybody we're leaving out. But, Again, overall, I think it's the deepest class as far as there's probably 5 or 6 teams I think could potentially win the state title, where in the other few we've covered, it's 4 or less.
All right. Well, we got one more class that we're going to go through here real quick, and then we will talk about the teams that we think are going to win a state championship this year. And we'll also talk about some players that we think are probably going to be in that running for player of the year in the classification that they represent. And we also will talk playoff bids real quick before we do that. Let's do it before. So last but not least for us, we will try to dive into some 8-man as we go throughout the season, of course. But 2B is where we've got the rankings cut off at here. And, it starts with number 1, Napavine. It starts with number 2, Okanagan. After that, I think it's going to be really tough for the teams ranked beyond, but Shawela of Jenkins, number 3, Lynn Ritzfield Sprague at number 4, PL Willapa Valley at 5, Toledo at 6, Riverview at 7, Raymond South Bend at 8, Lake Roosevelt 9, and Coopville at 10. There's, I think, 4 teams from District 4 represented there in the top 10, and another team that's in District 4 that's going to compete this year is Kalama, that's not ranked here in the top 10. So the 2B class to me is very, very cut and dry. Napavine and Okanagan are, in my opinion, on a collision course once again for a rematch in the state championship game. I don't want to spoil, picks on who I think is going to win, but Okanagan's a 2B school that turns out like 60 guys, for how big their school is. I mean, that's incredible, and then Napavine just has Ashton Demarest, a phenomenal quarterback. They got athletes up and down the roster. They could be 2-time defending champions, but Kalama just had Jackson Esri, was able to do just enough late, a couple years ago to beat Napavine. That was the second time that those teams played that year. But I don't really have a whole lot of, I guess, guts to go beyond Okanagan and go beyond Napavine here. I just based on them. So each team is only graduating like 10 seniors, out of 50 and 60 man rosters. They played with underclassmen last year, and they're going to continue to just rebuild and dominate, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Okanagan might have I mean, it's hard to say this about a 2B kid, but they might have the best pound for pound two-way player, or one of the best two-way players in the state that not a lot of people know about. His last name doesn't look like it's said this way, but Carter Kukenboo. He played quarterback last year, and I messaged Devin his highlights a couple weeks ago. I was like, dude, look at this kid play quarterback. He looks like Josh Allen or something. He's 6'5", 230, mobile, strong arm, but they're going to actually use him at tight end more, I guess, this year because they graduated some big targets last year and need a big athlete to throw the ball to. But he's a cool story. Todd, I think it's Miles, or it might be Mills, from SB Live wrote an article about him and how he's literally just your modern day cattle ranch kid. Family owns like 7,000 or 8,000 acres up there in Okanagan. And when he's not playing football or going to school, he's pretty much on his horse rounding up cows. And reminds me of Will Dirting, I don't know if you guys remember that name, but ex-Cougar middle linebacker that probably played back at turn of the 2000s. And he was one of my favorite players as a kid. But
same team with DeVar Darling, right? And Gesser?
Yep. And I think Ryan Long, ex-Anacortes alum, Outland Trophy winner.
That sounds right.
Yeah, but he's probably the best player they've had since him, and a very unique athlete that you're not going to find at the 2B level or most levels for that matter as far as size and athleticism go.
Devin, what do you got, man? 2B. Woo!
I don't got much for 2B, if I'm being honest with you. I'm not very well versed like you guys. The small schools.
This is well versed.
I wouldn't say this is well versed.
More so than me.
I love it.
No, those top two are obvious. Chihuahua played everybody tough last year. That's why I put them at 3. Lynn Ritzville Sprague lost some guys, but they got some good players coming back in Brady Bonus and Brock Kinch. PL Willapa Valley was a pretty tough school. Toledo played everybody pretty tough. I mean, with the exception of your Napavine, once you got to the state, the cream really rise to the top. But Riverview
team last year from Jenkins, they ended up, I think, going to the semis. So they're very much deserving of where they're at. I think that they probably are the next best in line.
Yeah, definitely. Riverview's got a new quarterback they're excited about. Let me go to my list here. That would help me out. What was his name? Hyatt Clark. He looks like he could be a difference maker, and got a motivated young coach there. Raymond South Bend was tough last year. Lake Roosevelt was kind of like Chewelah, played some teams tougher than probably some assumed to start the year. And Coopville made state for the first time since I was born in 1990. First-year head coach, who was a longtime assistant there, Bennett Richter. He once trucked me over at first base in a Legion baseball game in high school, and familiar with him a little bit and the way he can. If his players lower the shoulder like he does, they'll be just fine this year.
No, that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, totally. But dark horse team I left off, especially after further review, Kalama. They could be good enough to give Napavine another run for their money this year. They got plenty of good players across the board.
Oh, District 4 is loaded with competition. With PL Wilpa Valley and Raymond South Bend and Toledo. You got a couple of those teams already in the ticker at the bottom of your screen. And then Kalama with Aiden Brown as a quarterback. These guys are going to make some plays. And I'm pretty positive that Kalama only had like 3 or 2 seniors on last year's team leave. So I very much think that they're going to be a team that is competitive. And they've got championship pedigree. Sean McDonald, as I mentioned earlier, he was the coach during those 2 championships. So, it's a little bit different of a culture, since he's left. But winning football is winning football. And Kalama, they won championships back in the early 2000s, late 90s. That's when they started to break through. I don't know if you guys remember, but they played against a team called Tacoma Baptist back then. And Tacoma Baptist used to be big-time players. I think it was 1A back then, though. I don't think it was 2B. I'm pretty sure that it was a 1A classification, but that's when Kalama really started to come around and start to be competitive year in and year out. So it's very much a culture. It's kind of like Kelso, honestly, but it's just 10 miles further south on I-5.
Yeah, that'll be a good game to see them play Napavine this year. And Napavine's got to play Linden Christian. So, going up in class, that'll be an interesting matchup. I think that's week 6 or so, or maybe week 5. But like you said earlier, I don't feel you could probably rearrange 3 through 10 or 3 through 12. In this class, I'd say spots 3 through 16 are open once it comes to playoff time, and the top 2 seeds are going to be the same as they are to start the year.
What was the team that you were getting a lot of shit for not having in the top 10? Wasn't it on Alaska?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Same team that got beat, 55-6 or 55-0 against Okanagan last year?
Yeah. They're probably going to be improved. I like I said to those guys back, they would know much more about those teams than I would, so I appreciate all the input on it because, frankly, some even 1A schools, it's tough to find information, but 2B alone is very, very difficult in terms of digging deep.
Okanagan's got almost everybody back, so if that's the barometer test that we're going off of, let's wait and see. But again, if they are good, that continues to speak volumes about District 4 and how much competition that they're going to have.
Right. I was going to say Okanagan did lose probably the most beautiful mullet in the game last year. That I don't know his name, but I sure seeing pictures at number 32. He's one of their captains, I think, running back, and that was stuff of legends. So. They lost a couple guys, but yeah, like I said earlier, they're returning probably one of the best athletes pound for pound in the entire state in Kookaburra. And I know he's tough. If you're growing up on a cattle ranch, you're working harder than most kids have, in a day or working harder in a day than a lot of kids probably have in their whole life.
Yeah. Sorry, I got a yawn. I'm fighting off here. Do you have anything to add for 2B and the plethora of knowledge there?
No, definitely not. I got no plethora of knowledge of any sorts for 2B, unfortunately, so trusting you guys on that one.
This is
2B and 1B is where Matt Evans really shined
yeah. I was
for
about to
us.
say
Yeah.
this is where Matt makes his bread and butter right here, baby. So
For sure.
yeah. By the way, excited for Matt. You know, having the baby and stuff, and becoming a dad this year. That's awesome, man. It's like you know, the first year that you know our son was born, it just totally changes your perspective on life, and you know, like you know what your commitment is as a person, as a father every day. So yeah, I'm sure he's enjoying that. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to see what his rankings put out.
What do you mean? What his rankings put out? It's a computer.
Oh, true. Yeah, sorry. He's
What
the
his
code writer, though.
what his algorithm puts out? How about that?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
No,
The brain.
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely going to be awesome. So, all right, so let's shelve the previews for the teams, and let's get into some controversy real quick, and then we'll name our players to watch, and then we'll name our state championship picks, and we'll call it a night here. So, all right. So, for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, based on what we've been talking about, there has been a change in playoff allocations from the Northwest Conference in the 2A class and the 1A class. And the reason, the reason why this is a big deal is because it goes without saying that the Northwest Conference has produced probably the best brand of football, you know, statewide over the last couple of years. You got Linden as the state champions the last two seasons, and then last year you had a log jam in 1A. You had three teams tied for two spots in Mount Baker, Linden Christian, and Nooksack Valley. So first, let's start in 2A. In 2A, they've gone from 3 playoff spots to 2. Now, they don't do crossover games like other districts do in the state, to where you're going to play a one-off game to get into the round of 16. These teams automatically make the round of 16. Based on what we saw last year with Cedro, Linden, and Anacortes all making the quarterfinals, this is a big, big, big deal. You know, not having one of those 3 teams potentially in the postseason to me is unthinkable. Like, I don't see why we have to take away a spot completely. Why can't you leave it at 3 and introduce a crossover game? Thoughts?
Yeah, if I remember right, I think in the 1A, the bid, well, it could go to, you could pick one of 2 conferences for it to go to. One would be the Caribou Trail, and then District 6. I'm having a hard time remembering who's in District 6.
But just 2A, just with that class.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So 2A. Yeah, and I mean, you're looking at it this year, like we talked about earlier. Seahome could be a quality top 10 team, so you could have 4 teams that are worthy of being in the top 10, and were for much of last year. We forget Burlington Edison was in a lot of people's top 10 last year. To begin the season too, and they should have a pretty decent squad this year as well. So you have 5 teams that probably are playoff caliber teams, but you're only going to see 2 of them get in. So if anybody loses more than 1 game, they're pretty much out.
Yeah.
Devin, you represent the Northwest Conference. How do you feel about the reduction from 3 to 2 in the 2A class there?
You know, personally, I really just don't understand, because like you mentioned, with the 3 going to the quarterfinals, and then, you know, like Tyson mentioned, Burlington Edison being in a lot of people's top 10s, and Seahome playing well all year. And it's not like the league hasn't had a down, you know, in the last couple of years. Like Squalicum is still one of those teams who's hit and miss as well. You know, they could be good, you know, so that's like, even Lakewood is pretty solid most of the time, you know, so that's almost all 8, 9, 10 teams, you know, so I don't understand the reduction standpoint at all, personally, especially with you having 3, 4 already playing well last year. I would assume you'd want the same, but yeah, I just don't get it. Like, I want to know why.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what the where the other bid is going to go, because is there an automatic, one thing that might make sense to me is if you're giving that one bid to, say, the CWAC, to where there's one automatic bid from that conference that goes to the round of 16, and then you introduce the crossover game, because they do something like that with basketball, I believe, Devin, when it comes to the Spokane League, to where one team gets an automatic bid, and then the 2 and the 3 seeds, I think, from those leagues, they play the 1 and the 2 from the Spokane League. So I believe last year that the CWAC only had 2 teams make the playoffs or get an opportunity to do it, if in Othello, and then was it Freda or Kashmir? No, or Prosser? I can't remember which of those 2 teams, but
yeah, Freda got in because they beat Prosser.
That's right.
But yeah, so it looks like the allocation actually goes to a combination of District 5 and 6, which used to just get 1, which I assume was based off of, well, that's kind of strange how they have this labeled. Because, yeah, it goes from 3 to 2 in District 1, and then the rest of them stay the same, and then 5 and 6 goes from 1 to 2. But that's where I'm a little confused, because like you said, we had Ephrata and Othello. I guess Ephrata is counting as a District 6 team, according to the breakdown here on WIAA, because there are no District 6 2A schools. So that would be, but still, that doesn't really make sense, because we had 2 teams get in from District 5 last year. So I would like a knowledgeable explanation as to what's really changing overall.
It's crazy to me to think about doing this. It's absolutely crazy. Like, are you punishing the league for being good? Because it almost seems like that, to me. Like, what's the competitive balance here? Like, what are we accomplishing in this whole sense? Like, I would love to get somebody like Mick Hoffman of the WIAA to come on and at least just kind of give us a rundown as to maybe where we're missing the ball here at, because teams that have been coming out of that league for a lot of years have been very, very good and turned out a lot of really good talent to go to the next level as well. I mean, I don't like to crap on other leagues and other teams, all right? But just from a comparison standpoint, like, EVCO and Greater St. Helens have 4 teams out of, a 7-man league, and then an 8-man league, play for crossover games, Yes, those teams are going to weed each other out. Yeah, you might have 3 EVCOs and 1 Greater St. Helens end up making it, right? But that's still a district as a whole, getting 4 spots in the round of 16. I mean, we're essentially saying that a district is only guaranteed 2 spots now. That doesn't seem right to me. Like I said, why can't we just do crossovers across the board? I know that they wanted to work something into their deal as a conference, but now it seems like it's really backfired.
Yeah, well, and that's where I guess I'd have to include the crossover games, but just looking at how the allocations break down, I don't quite understand how District 5 essentially /6 jumps from 1 to 2, like I said, when we had 2 last year. And that's the only change. But yeah, 3 and 4 both get 4 bids. And meanwhile, 3 of the final 4 teams, that was for, 3 of basically the final 8 teams, I suppose, were from NWC 2A, and Cedro, Anacortes, and Linden. Anacortes and Linden both being in semifinal games. Yeah. Or the championship, obviously.
Yeah, and Cedro wasn't like dog shit last year, so
no, Yeah. Yeah, they beat a good Tumwater team, like we said earlier, handled them very well, and then ran into WF West, who just basically outscored them and outgunned them.
Yeah, I just, yeah, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. I'm going to say something real quick here that's pretty bold, though. But I mean, you're talking about the potential. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to happen yet, but the potential that Linden might not be a playoff team, right? I mean, think about that for a second. Like they're returning the least amount of starters when it comes to their league. Yes, they're the defending champs 2-time, but I mean, realistically, you cannot afford to drop a game that could be or should be considered a winnable game, right? I mean, like if they were to lose on the road to Cedro or get tripped up at home by Anacortes in the last game of the year, that could be the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. Like, isn't that asinine to think about?
Totally. And if I'm not mistaken, Devin, you probably recall this game more clearly, but Seaholm was within 8 points, wasn't it 28-20 or something last year? Yep. And so, yeah, you've got three plus teams that all played them within a score.
Seaholm also beat Mount Baker last year.
Yeah, and they were a team that was forced to actually forfeit a game, too.
Yeah, that was.
Which
they also have a new coach coming in, I will say, because of that whole situation. They have a new coach, and he's going to be great. I think he brings a lot of energy. He's from Squalicum. He's going to change their offense a lot. But Seaholm is another question mark as well, as in like, they lost a lot on the line and both running backs gone, etc. But yeah, I don't get the bid at all, especially in the 1A2 with 2 being in the Final Four.
Yeah.
So why make it 1? Yeah, that's bad. Especially when Linden Christian's in every year. They're always up there, and then Nooksack is very good.
Yeah, it's worse in the 1A. You go from 2 bids from last year to 1, and you had a 3-way tie for first last year. And then now what? Like
yep.
You lose a league game, and you're probably out.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like the bids from them, you could attribute it to one of 2 conferences, because basically in the 1A, they lose a bid, and so does District 7. They go from 3 to 2. So District 2 picks up a bid, which that's where Kings comes from. And, if we're making any predictions, I would assume Granite Falls probably picks up that second nomination, and then go down to District 7. And, that's the Northeast Conference. So last year we had Lakeside and Freeman made it all the way to the Final Four. I'm pretty sure anyways, beat Eatonville, and then I think lost to Royal. And Lakeside, obviously, but one of those allocations goes to District 6, which would be the Caribou Trail, which last year I think we saw, was it Kashmir? It was either Kashmir or OMAC. OMAC had won the league from an outright standpoint, but I don't know if it came down to their crossover. I think maybe they lost, and I'd have to go look. But either way, they were both good teams. Cascade of Leavenworth played some teams tough last year, but still, yeah, you're going to get to see, a Kashmir or an OMAC and a Granite Falls instead of Linden Christian or Nooksack Valley, which is crazy, mind-boggling.
Like, how could you, like, I don't know. It's just, yeah. We need somebody on here to really, like, get into the brass tacks of this. It's like, what are they going to tell you? They're probably going to tell you something like this. Well, there's no guarantee that those teams are going to be, that good every single year. We're going by how many schools are, in the district per capita versus some other areas in the state that are a lot larger territory wise, but there's longer distance between high schools and stuff. And so we got to look at that geographically. Is it fair? Is it not fair? It's like, but I'd say, again, using Evco Trico as an example, it's like You're going to get 4 crossover games there, I think, right, Tyson? It's 4 bids out of District 4 1A between Evco and Trico. Like last year, I'm pretty sure that it was Tenino, Montesano, Eatonville, and Castle Rock. Castle Rock played Eatonville. Yeah, so tough to. That might have been it. There might be 3 bids coming out of there. I think
there's 4 this year, and there was 4. There was 4 last year. You're talking about District 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had La Center.
That's it. Yes.
Eatonville, Montesano, and Tenino.
Right. Yeah.
So it'll probably be the same 4 this year, unless Seton Catholic or that's really the only Castle Rock. Seton Catholic or Castle Rock, I guess. It's probably up to 6 teams primarily.
But a couple of years ago, like the Lynx just buzzsawed Tenino, in Civic Stadium in the quarterfinals. Like teams run up against each other very often in this whole setup here, and like the Northwest just has been better for quite a while. And we're not talking about Royal right now, obviously, because Royal's been the best team over the last couple of years, right? They probably deserve more praise than anything else. They're probably listening to this being like, these guys aren't winning state championships like we are. I get that, right? I want to give Royal their due here, right? But from a competitive nature standpoint here, like having one team come out of that fray is just completely bonkers to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you said with Royal, what have they won? Let's see, how many? Since 2000, they've won.
It's a lot.
Like 10 championships? Maybe 12. And then 2 in the 90s. How many have they won?
Yeah, Lynn Christian too. They probably, both of those two take a majority, I assume.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's sad to know one of those 2 won't make it.
Yeah.
Because they definitely both have the talent to be there at the end.
Well, that just means that, one of the teams that we've got ranked in the top 4 in Linden Christian and Nooksack Valley, they're definitely going to be staying home. Not even going to have a chance to meet up in the postseason. I mean, they've got it basically like, like college football, like losing a game, you're out of the national title race, essentially, like you got to go undefeated.
Yeah, and you're talking about a league last year where they should have had 3 teams in, but only got 2, and now they're only going to have 1. It's,
sure.
I mean, Linden Christian, we all know they beat Royal on the road and then have a few injuries late in the year and hit a hot Mount Baker team in that little wild card playoff system that they do up there, and basically lose a quarter of football to Mount Baker, and they're out. And they probably were good enough. They would have been we would have probably seen 3 of 4 of them in the Final Four last year, honestly.
So real quick, if I could just jump in real quick with Linden Christian this year. So, their schedule, we saw not too long ago posted on Twitter, but I mean, good Lord, Lakeside 9 Mile Falls week 1, Archbishop week 2, Bellevue Christian week 3, Royal week 4, Napavine week 5, Nooksack Valley week 6, Meridian week 7, Blaine week 8, Mount Baker week 9. Like,
those last 3 are probably their easiest 3.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree.
That's still,
it's brutal.
That's a crazy stretch. The whole schedule is crazy. So maybe they won't even have the opportunity, maybe they slip up on a couple of those.
But all they have to do is win their league games. I mean, they can afford losses to Archbishop. I mean, they can afford losses to Royal at this point, right? They cannot afford a loss to Nooksack Valley. That's about it.
Great big game.
Oh, that's like the game.
Their schedule is no slouch either. I mean, they open with Mountain View on the road, And then they got Connell at home this year, so they don't have to make that Eastern Washington travel. But then Kings on the road, Hoquiam, Meridian, LC, Mount Baker, and then end it with Blaine. So, I mean, even their first 3 games of their schedule are quite the gauntlet too. And then you add in their conference schedule. But, yeah, I would say, Linden Christian would ultimately have to beat Nooksack to have a chance. And I don't know. When I look at depth and physicality, like I said earlier, I think Nooksack and Kashmir. Royal is kind of like its own little asterisk out here because they set the standard, but those are the 2 teams that definitely clearly seem to have it. I mean, Linden Christian's got plenty of dudes too, but we'll see.
I want to hypothesize one thing real quick here. So it's very likely that Linden Christian could beat Royal 2 years in a row and not even get into the postseason 2 years in a row.
Yeah, imagine that.
Think about that.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about right now.
Right.
Unfair.
Yeah, and you're talking about a team too, Linden Christian, that actually, I mean, in the regular season took it to Nooksack pretty good. Nooksack showed kind of some of their youth, I think, in that game in comparison to how they played the rest of their schedule. But I'd say Linden probably lost more overall than Nooksack did, so it'll be interesting to see how they wash out when it comes to a head this season.
All right.
Matchup to watch in that game, just before we move on, is Linden Christian D-line versus Nooksack O-line. I think that's huge because, Jeremiah Wright and I think Caden Stewart, I don't know if he plays D-end or if he's linebacker, but he's always in the backfield too. He's a name to watch.
Yeah, he's pretty much he's like Cade Eldridge 2.0. I mean, as far as he was there last year, but size and ability to play and affect the game on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it'd be that same role pretty much.
Yeah.
Has Jeremiah committed anywhere yet for football?
I don't believe so.
No. He's being looked at as an edge rusher, though, right, for football?
Or a tight end, too, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about basketball player? He's pretty good at that, too.
Oh, man, he's a monster on the basketball court.
Yeah, bro. I just want to throw it out real quick. Man, it was a travesty having to watch Linden Christian versus Zilla last year in the quarterfinals. Like, I know that's just how it works because Zilla lost in the regional round and they just found themselves in that position. But like that was some like super high level competition. And like watching Linden Christian last year on the basketball court, oh my gosh, like they are just a well-oiled machine. Yep,
it's gonna be interesting to see how they adjust this year. Graduating their seniors, but that's a whole nother subject, whole nother sport.
All right. Anything to add real quick on the travesty that is the reduction in playoff berths for the Northwest Conference?
I say we parlayed into picking the state champions and some players to watch.
All right. Yeah. So let's start with our favorites for player of the year. I don't have a ton to go off of in 2B, to be honest with you, other than I do know of one, and that's Ashton Demarest. I think that he's a major contender. And then depending on how Kalama does this year, I would throw Aiden Brown potentially into the mix.
For sure. He looks like a standout. I had Demarest too, and then Carter Kukenboo, kid I've already talked about earlier. 6'5", 230. Any team would be lucky to have him. There's a kid that plays in Manson named Angel Lopez that's a stud. I know Central's looked at him. He plays running back and linebacker and runs hard. And then the only other guy I had in 2B circled was Brady Bonus from Lynn Ritzville Sprague. He's a 25 guy. Him and Kukenboo are 25s. Demarest and Lopez are both 24s. But Bonus, I just want to call him Brody. I said Brady too, but it's Brody. I always want to call him Brody Bones. But he said he gets that all the time. And I said, well, by judging how the way you run, it's fitting because he definitely is out there looking to crush Bones. And I saw him put up a video of, I think he threw up like 20 reps at 225 as a junior. And I posted on there and looked at NFL Combine. I was like, that's better than Antonio Gibson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the NFL Combine. So he good stud player there at Lynn Ritzville Sprague. But I'd say it's definitely between the top two in Kukenbu and Demarest as far as, just where their teams are going to be at the end of it all.
All right. 1A. I'll start here. I think that I think a lot of this is going to depend on postseason play. I think that this probably should be a regular season award more than anything else. But if I was to kind of front runner 1A, I would go with Colton Lentz and probably Jeremiah Wright. I think that those are some guys that are going to be right there for in 1A. Devin, you agree?
Yes, I agree with those two. And of course, I think Colton is my pick. Jeremiah is a great pick as well. I think Lance Allred from Royal is another guy who could maybe get his name in the mix as well.
Those are my top three. So I had it in that order: Colton Lentz, Jeremiah Wright, and Lance Allred. And then two other names I'd like to throw out because we really don't know what he's going to do, but he could totally elevate the program. And I mentioned earlier is Caden LaPlante, Granite Falls, and then Caden Stewart over there at LC too, just with him being such a two-way difference maker on both sides for them. We can talk about Jeremiah, especially because he's the quarterback, but, Stewart could even have a bigger impact as far as gaining yardage goes in a multitude of ways and also being stout on the defensive side. But top guy, I would lock. I could almost lock it in. Is definitely Colton Lentz. Some of those, he stepped up in huge moments last year. That run against Mountain View where he took it 85 yards almost or something close to that. And shout out to Brent. He's got some good pedigree too. So I'd say that's a lock. I agree with both of you guys.
All right. I'm glad I went first. I'll let one of you guys go first here for 2A. Whoever wants to jump in.
Yikes. I've got too long of a list, so I probably shouldn't go first.
I'll go first. I'll say one.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Brock Beaner.
I like it.
I'll leave it at that.
I love it. He'd probably be my top pick too, for reasons that could be obvious to some.
Man, no love for Brady?
No, Brady is equally on there, actually. The reason Brock is probably a tighter lock because he's going to get more tackles. He's playing linebacker. Brady's going to be back at safety, although that could wash out with interceptions.
Brock gets the ball more, no?
Yeah, and maybe that'll change this year. I mean, just like, that West Valley game last year, we saw them both rumble for 213 yards.
Oh, my God, that's crazy.
I would assume that Brady – they've got other great receivers there. Landon Schaefer's going to have a good year. Rylan Lang is a name nobody talks about. That is an absolute savage on both sides of the ball. Plays like a guy with his hair on fire. But, yeah, so overall, I mean, just from a volume standpoint, Brock's a good standout there. But let me just run down this list real quick because it's the deepest one, like I mentioned before. Gage Brumfield, WF West. Great two-way player, going to be playing quarterback. Karsten Reynolds, you obviously have to name. Another guy, we've talked about most of these kids. Marquand McCraney at High Line, Gunnar Trachty, probably the only true one-way player I have on my list, but I think he'll have a big year. He had 29 touchdowns and 1 interception last year. Brant Hepner, have to have him on there. Another kid that's going to impact the game big time, running and throwing. His team won't be there, but from a numbers standpoint, Diesel Wilkinson, absolute monster on both sides. Holden B, another quarterback. Logan Sloman and Marcus Nixon. Some of those kids aren't going to have the team around them necessarily that will elevate them at the end like some will, but it's a deep class with a lot of, most of these it's pretty split between juniors and seniors, but just shows how promising and talent loaded the 2A class is.
Obviously, I got all those names in mind. A name that I have in mind that potentially could, get into the mix. It'll just be depending on how the team does this year, and I think that's Carson Reynolds. I think that Cedro Woolley is one of those teams that could end up taking one of those spots from Anacortes or Linden, depending on how it goes. But it's weird thinking that one of those three teams is like for sure going to be sitting home more than likely this year. But that would be a name that I would throw in if I was going to dissect your list and like narrow it down to, I'd say like some favorites. Number one, I love Logan Sloman. I think Logan Sloman is a guy who is like 7'11". He's always open. So get him the ball early and often. North Kitsap is going to do that. They're going to still live on their defense, but I mean, he will be, the engine that takes North Kitsap's offense where it needs to go this year. And I think the Vikings are in line for another one-loss, campaign, maybe an undefeated regular season. I think they match up with Tumwater early in the season again, but that'll be a good barometer test to see where they end up. But I really love Logan Sloman. And then just like, back to the Northwest Conference, with I just mentioned with Carson Reynolds, if Linden is going to three-peat and get themselves back to a deep postseason run, it's going to be because of Brant Hepner. And Brant Hepner could end up taking home player of the year honors just because of that reason, because he is going to have to be the guy. And, Linden has been on record, at least, publicly on the social media and, to the local media there, that, they're going to do things a little bit differently this year. They're going to look to throw the ball. And when you got a 6'6" quarterback that can see the field and has a strong arm and has the ability to get outside the pocket with his legs and also, run downhill like, Tyson mentioned earlier, I think that he's the type of guy that as long as the team comes out and does what it needs to do and he gets deep into the postseason, I think that, he's very much a favorite. I do like the potential for Holden B because, again, if Washougal makes a deep run, if Washougal gets themselves, in position to play in the semifinals, it'll be because of stellar quarterback play more than anything else, because Washougal's defense isn't going to be holding teams, down all season long, in my opinion. They're going to have to light up the scoreboard. And I think that, the Evers connection, him being a really good wide receiver is going to, make it really easy for Holden B to put up some really, really big numbers this year. And then, I also like your pick for Gage Brumfield, because if WF West is going to have a good year, it's going to be because of Gage Brumfield's transition from wide receiver to quarterback. So those would be my guys from 2A that I absolutely feel solid about winning the player of the year.
One more I just want to throw in there real fast.
Please.
Is Zach Robertson from Fife, running back. And I think he's playing a little bit of quarterback as well this year. So he's just another guy like Marcus Nixon, who you guys named, just be like the whole offense,
Absolutely.
He's a great kid too, by the way, character-wise.
Yeah, he is.
That always bodes well.
Yeah, and all those 5 kids are actually. Their quarterback last year was an excellent kid too.
All right, 3A. It's getting kind of tough here, but not really. I think that it's probably 3 guys, and I'll just lead it off with my favorite is Braden Platt of Yelm. As long as Yelm continues to do what they do, Yelm is probably going to go undefeated again in regular season play, in my estimation. I think they beat everybody. He's probably the best 2-way player in 3A. He's going to get a ton of tackles as a linebacker. He's going to get a ton of touchdowns. He had multiple 4-touchdown games last season. I have a feeling that this guy's going to be on your guys' list as well. But Jason Brown of O'Day is another guy that I feel is a real heavy favorite in the 3A class. And, I don't know of a couple guys outside of that I think are going to have an opportunity to win the award. That doesn't mean that there aren't guys that are capable of doing it, but I think that those 2 names have such star power behind them and will have the numbers to back it up. Say the only thing is that, I think O'Day does have a lot of athletes on the team, like Sir Keenan Hart as a running back behind Brown. If something were to happen to Brown, I think Sir Keenan Hart would step in and do almost just as good of a job. But as long as Brown is RB1 on the depth chart with the athletes that he has in front of him. If I was going to go a dark horse, I might go, depending on, who gets out of the quarterback room in Bellevue, I might go Resort or, Riker Moon, depending on how those two guys play, because I think Bellevue is going to end up having a really strong season.
I've heard it's going to be Lucas.
Yeah, he was throwing darts to Moon last year at wide receiver. I have Riken Moon right there behind Jason Brown and Braden Platt. They're obviously tier 1, and then I think tier 2 is kind of wide open. Besides Moon, I listed Rashawn Clark at Garfield because he will be playing both ways, and he'll be surrounded by a deeper, more talented no knock to Federal Way, but Garfield's obviously got plenty of talent on their roster, so he should be able to play even more free. And then off the radar, well, not off the radar. He's on a lot of people's radars, but as far as player of the year candidate, Darian Clemens from Spanaway Lake. Saw him in that max exposure camp, and he was just locking kids up. And then he's also probably will play on the offensive side. And then we've got obviously from a quarterback standpoint in 3A, I would say he's, from a ranking standpoint, he's definitely the best of the bunch. Kamanong from Garfield, because he'll have plenty of weapons at his disposal.
I think one other name I'll throw in there as well on Bellevue, another target Lucas will throw to is Hogan Hansen, the tight end going to Michigan. He's another guy who very similar to Riken Moon, who could just put up numbers.
Yeah, 6'6", 220 running down the field, built like him. He's definitely. They're going to have a good – Bellevue's not known for passing the ball, but you got the strongest armed quarterback according to that camp and a couple of great targets to throw the ball to. So they could be much more dynamic this year.
Yeah, very dynamic.
His foot was on the line on that throw.
64 yards, whatever.
It's only 45 more yards than I can throw it with pads.
Yeah. About 35 more than like Jake Browning and Keith Price could too. So I love Keith Price, love Browning too, but
not with comments like that. All right, so I think it's gonna come down to probably who wins between Graham Kapowson and Emerald Ridge. I think Davion Super Alice is going to be there, and I think that his two targets as well. And then you could say the same for Jake Skockle at Emerald Ridge. I think that, Skockle had a great year last season and still has Tony Harst at wide receiver. And these wide receivers, I mean, they should not be left out of the conversation either. But, usually in these scenarios, like, most of the credit is going to go the quarterback's way, which I think is kind of unfair because I think that these wide receivers make it very easy for them to do their job. But those are the guys that I would be looking at right away. So, and then Jay Sean Lemar.
Yeah, I agree with all those as well. Maybe Navari Dixon as well. I don't know how much Emerald was going to run the ball because of Jake, but Jake's my top pick as well. I think if GK does go far, I think Malachi Durant could get it over the quarterback. Depending, it's hard to gauge, with the playmakers getting over the quarterback, but I feel like it happens a lot more.
Yeah, that and with their distribution of playmakers between him and Norris and Flores. Shackles or Skakel, however you.
I think it's Skockle. That's how
Skockle.
Yeah.
That sounds the most German, so that makes sense. The other guys I have on here, besides Super Ales, let's just call him that. But Zay Rainey Sale, I mean, mainly a defensive player, but I could see him getting like 15 sacks plus this year easily. Does play offense too. One that I mentioned earlier that if they really elevate to what they were, say, 5-6 years ago, Jalen Viars at Bothell, the quarterback. And then his team's probably not going to be there at the end, but as far as putting up numbers, Rocco Koch, the way he can run the ball, and he's pretty good with his arm. And then I talked about him earlier, but two-way Demon, he won't get the award because he lives over here. We'll just call this there's a West Coast bias per se instead of it's always East Coast bias. But Kyson Thomas, I got to throw on there too because from a two-way standpoint, he could have some ridiculous numbers by the end of the season.
I was about to say, with all the time that we spent talking about Moses Lake, I'm surprised that they don't got five guys on the watch list. We should probably throw Gavin Packer, though. Honestly,
I was going to say him too.
I think he should be in consideration because I think he's going to have the numbers that are probably going to back it up. Even though I tore Tyson's ranking apart for Skyview being number 5, if they are indeed the 5th best team in 4A, it will be largely in part because they've got a weapon like Gavin Packer at wide receiver.
That and because Drew Carlson stepped up at quarterback to
absolutely
make the transition smoothly.
Yeah, and if we want to mention a quarterback, sorry, Devin. I was going to say too, if we wanted to mention another quarterback that we talked about earlier that isn't on there, DJ Duran, pocket passer, he could light it up, and Chiawana could make that run that we mentioned like they have. But I didn't have him on my list originally, kind of an afterthought. But yeah, there's some good quarterback play at the 4A level. A little bit more harder to guess outside of Jake compared to some of the other classes.
I feel like we should really try to get to know a lot about Kamayak, and especially since Matt chimed in earlier that he expects them to be a team that's going to F some shit up over there. So, that's an indicator, that they probably got some dudes that should become household names over here on the West Coast. For
sure. Definitely. Well, and they got a week 2 matchup with Moses Lake. That'll tell us a lot about both of those teams. So
that'll tell us.
I'm going to try to go to that one for sure. It's at Kamayakin too.
All right. So I think it's settled for what we think about for players. And if anybody's got nominations, type them into the live stream. Anybody can go back and rewatch this and type in that we're wrong and hold us accountable. Well, I'm happy to be held accountable. I've had a lot of fun doing this so far, guys. I cannot believe how long we can sit here and talk about football and, kind of still just barely, scratch the surface, so to speak. I mean, there's a lot that we really need to dive into here before the season's over with. So, let's go ahead and finish it up here with our picks to win. We could go 2 teams that we think are championship game if you guys want, or if you just want to talk about the team that you think is going to win. But we can start in 2B real quick, and then we'll just work our way back up and finish with 4A. So we'll just go in order here. So I'll kick us off here. So for 2B, I already said it earlier, and I'll say it again. I think Napavine and Okanagan do battle for the championship once again, and I think it's going to be a closer game. It was a 2-score game last year. It was 14 points, but I think that both those teams are going to be primed for another rematch, and I got Napavine winning it 31-24. Yeah,
I agree. As far as 2 teams, let's just stick with that trend because some of these hard to pick just one. But you have to pick a winner, and I would say still to overall Napavine, they beat them pretty soundly last year, 41-27. I would say Okanagan closes that gap a little, and maybe it's like a 35-28 game.
Devin.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree.
All right.
Except I'm going to pick Okanagan because why not?
There you go. All right. There we go. Ballsy. Okay, so 2 for Napavine, 1 for Okanagan, but we all agree they will play for the championship. So,
in one opinion that is not very reliable.
I think it's great. I think
every man deserves an opinion.
Yeah, I think it's super reliable in this regard here. So, all right, 1A. Now this is where it's going to get I think really tough. Just simply because of the Northwest Conference allocations, I think it's really going to be dependent on who wins the league. So it's like, are we really going to put all of our chips, behind either Nooksack or Linden Christian, or do we go for the Royal 3-peat? I'll let somebody else start. Someone else start.
I've got it down to 3 teams, but for the sake of not seeing Royal three-peat, I think they have plenty of horses to do it. I'm going to say they run into Nooksack or Kashmir in one of the semifinals and lose. And my final is going to be Nooksack 23 over Kashmir 16.
I like the gutsy pick. I like it. Not gutsy that you're picking Nooksack to win, but gutsy that you got Kashmir in the championship game. I like it.
I might even have a more gutsy one for you because
Let's do it.
I do agree that Royal is going to fall in the semis. It's a bold prediction as well. Three-peating is very hard. I do have Nooksack Valley winning the state title over Kings. I think Kings is a team who could gain a lot of momentum. I think they have, like I said, one of the best offensive line. I think Noah Clark is a solid quarterback, and Quinn Carlson's a good running back. Carmelo La Roca, Maddox Boyce. I think they're overall a solid team. So, but I do think Nooksack Valley would win. I'd probably say 27-21.
Here's the kicker to that one. Who's going to win the regular season matchup?
Oh, man. Where's it at?
I think it's at Kings. Yeah, I've got their schedule actually pulled open right here. No, it's home.
No,
it's a home game. Oh, wait, no, that was last year. So, yeah, it's at Kings.
I was about to say, I thought that Kings made the trip up north last year.
Yeah, and that was a 1-point game.
Yeah, it's going to be another great one. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
So you guys got Nooksack, huh?
Yeah, or it's 2-point game, excuse me, 25-23. But yeah, Nooksack.
Listen, I don't mind agreeing with you guys. I think that Nooksack is a very good pick and very deserving pick. And they might very well be in the position to win the championship. However, I am going to pick the Lynx of Linden Christian. I think that they are probably in the best position to do it based on how tough their schedule is going to be throughout the year, that if they win the games early in the season in their schedule, they will have played the tougher competition all the way through. If they can survive the game against Nooksack in the regular season and beat them head-to-head and somehow get the playoff spot from them, because if you really think about it, to me, that's like almost the state championship within the regular season. Like those two teams going against each other. If Linden Christian gets it, because if we remember back to last year, like they were number 1 midway through the year after they beat Royal on the road, ending a 38-game winning streak, I think, for Royal. So if Jeremiah Wright is healthy, which he's coming back from an injury, but the word on the street is wink, that he's good to go. And he's an absolute menace on both sides of the ball. He's a quarterback that can use his legs and use his body very well and do a lot of Brant Hepner things and fall forward. So I go Lynx, and obviously they can't play Nooksack in the championship game because that's who I would have them against if they both were able to make it. But I think it'll be against Royal again. I'm going to give Royal the respect of getting back to the championship game, and I think you could be looking at a rematch situation to where Royal might return the favor to them in the regular season. They might come on the road and they might beat them, and Linden Christian might have to right their wrongs, so to speak, to get there. But I'm going with Linden Christian, and I think it's going to be a real tight, I'm going to say low scoring-ish game, like 21-20. Maybe like an extra point makes the difference in that one.
Yeah, and let's point out, wasn't last year Jeremiah's first year ever playing quarterback, Devin?
It was.
Yeah. So upside, I mean, a year under your belt, that'll help things out for sure.
He's a lot more. I don't want to say like slim, but like he's super in shape. After I watching him play basketball over the summer, he looks fantastic.
Yeah, a real difference maker there. It's crazy. Both the Linden schools have 6'6" monsters playing quarterback.
I want to say real quick before we jump to 2A, but those two schools within that community, like they have a rivalry. Don't get me wrong, but they support each other so well. you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and it's just it's like one big family, you know.
Except for
They
when they play each other.
exactly, but still, even when you play your brother, right, you always want to win, right? I mean, you never want to lose to your brother at anything, but you love your brother, and they exemplify respect and camaraderie, to the
Always.
fullest degree. They're a
Yeah.
community that grows up together, even though one's public, one's private. They do a great job as a community representing an entire like city. So I have nothing but respect for Linden Christian and Linden. So that's a good segue to the 2A classification here, because that's where Linden, some would say Big Brother. They've won a combined 4 straight state championships if you count basketball and football, but last 2 in football, which is crazy to think about, by the way. But I mean, there's just an absolute factory. I'll
Lost
start.
in baseball, right?
They did. They made the state championship game in baseball. I don't know if it would have been the first time ever that you
Ever.
would have
Yep.
had all 3 major boys sports winning it. But they made. I'll just say this: they made a run. There's some.
they did
Shout out to
that.
Kobe Parr. Kobe
Yeah.
Parr, if you're out
Kobe-
there.
I think they won all 3 when I was there in high school. Actually, like
Never
09,
happened before.
2010.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't
really?
I don't
Yep,
think
it's
it had
never
ever
happened.
happened. Yeah.
Oh, I thought they must have done it the following year and won 2 and then won the next. But anyways,
Yeah, but anyway, they're the team to beat here in 2A, and I want to go first here in this regard, just because I think that I have probably the most shocking prediction. But I don't think Linden wins the division, and I don't think that they make the playoffs. I think that you're going to see either Anacortes or Cedro win the league. I think Anacortes is probably going to win the league, and I think they'll get the spot. They got Cedro at home, so I think that they're in good position there. And I think that Linden, they got the capabilities to reload and retool. They've done it before. But if there's ever a year to get them and to trip them up, it's this season. They may still end up making the playoffs, and I may be wrong, but I like them missing out, not like it, but I think they're going to miss out on the playoffs. And so I don't think that we're going to have to really worry about that. If they're not in the playoffs, that opens up a lot of guys. But, I would say that North Kitsap and Anacortes would probably play in the championship game. I think that that's a rematch from this last year's quarterfinal game. And I'm going to say Anacortes wins this year. I don't know if I have a score for you, but I feel pretty good about the Seahawks winning this year.
Well, I might as well go next. I got the same thing. I also have Anacortes. I have them beating Linden. I do think Linden will go back again. They're going to be just as good in my eyes. I also see what you're saying, that they can miss out. Very possible, and I think Enumclaw is another team that I almost had, go all the way. But I'll say Anacortes 31-27 over Linden.
dang. I thought I was actually going to be the only one to pick Anacortes. And
You can't be surprised after last year.
yeah, and
Stages.
even though I've only got them at 4 in my rankings, the more I think about them playing Linden again, really this is Anacortes' opportunity. If they don't do it, they lose a senior quarterback, their best perimeter guy on the defense as far as corner goes, and Schaefer.
Yep.
Leisman, 6'5", 305. Last year they were just as prepared to do it, but I think, they really got to get a taste of what it was like to play at the highest level, especially after the year before playing, basically an independent schedule and not even having a chance to go to state.
Yep.
But I've got them against Enumclaw, 23-21. I think it'll be a very tight game if that is how it comes down. And, in the third or fourth quarter, it'll be up to whoever can make some plays. And I think, all bias aside, Anacortes has some pretty dynamic playmakers on their team. And not just a couple, but, when you talk about guys like Schaefer and Lang, and obviously both the Beaners, it's the kind of depth you need to match up with the best playmakers on the other side of the ball going both ways.
Yep.
I think Enum Claw is a great pick, Tyson. I really struggle with leaving them out of the championship game. I know that they're going to have to play a really, really good team in the semis, and I think they will get for sure to the semis. Because I believe that Enum Claw is going to go undefeated until like they did last year again. I think that they're returning a ton of guys, and they got a great quarterback. I just feel ultimately, how's the head-to-head matchup going to go if they play North Kitsap? North Kitsap's defense has the ability to do enough to keep it, low scoring. They were +5 in the turnover margin last year against Anacortes in their game that they played. So, their defense is super solid. If they ran up against Anacortes, this being Enum Claw, I'd have a hard time picking Enum Claw in that game because I just ultimately, I feel like that the schedule that Anacortes plays is going to be too much for those guys to handle because I don't think Enum Claw is going to play too difficult of a schedule this year. So, anything to add there before we head to 3A?
No, I'm just kind of surprised that our picks are pretty unanimously similar across the board, but
yeah,
I didn't think I was going to pick Anacortes until this segment started, and then I was like, actually,
yeah, we're convincing you is what you're saying, right?
No, before you ever even spoke, and based off all of our conversations, I thought there'd no way you'd mention Anacortes, but you threw.
You liar! You're such a liar.
I don't lie.
Bro, sorry, gotta throw it up here real quick. But Lucas Resor just commented a little bit ago that says that he's just watching right now, and he wants us to know that Ryken Moon doesn't play QB. He's just an athlete at wide receiver, running back, DB. I'm pretty sure.
I mentioned that.
What's that?
Oh,
Action.
Oh,
your internet's all over the place. Are you back?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, it showed your connection kind of spiking.
Okay, but, so I put it up on the screen for everybody to see, just in case I dip out of here. But yeah, Lucas Resor said that he's watching right now, a little delayed, but Ryken Moon does not play QB, just an athlete at wide receiver, running back, and DB. And I was saying, I'm pretty sure you might have mentioned that earlier, Devin. So
yeah, QB1 Lucas.
Yeah,
strongest arm in the state.
Hey, I'll transition smoothly into 3A if that works.
Please do,
because I have Bellevue in my state championship game.
I think it's a good pick.
I don't have them winning, unfortunately, because I think Yelm is too good. But that's my state championship pick right there. Yelm, Bellevue. I think it's going to be closer than people think. I think it's going to be pretty high scoring as well. So I think 35-31. Yelm, I think 31 on Yelm's defense is hard. But I think if anyone can do it, it's Bellevue in that dynamic offense.
Tyson, you want to go next?
Yeah, Bellevue's got some big meat to them too. Obviously, they got that. What's it? Demariot. Maybe Lucas can correct me, but that big lineman. That said, though, speaking of size, I got O'Day over Yelm, 31-28. I think that line. Yelm's got plenty of size themselves, but like I said, O'Day's line is like the Bellevue O-line of 15 years ago, where they outweighed the Seahawks in terms of average at each position. And when you pair that with potentially, there's conversations, some will say the best or one of the best running backs in the 24 class, and even a good backup to go behind them, I think they'll be too much this year.
Yeah, this is actually a really tough, decision here for me on who I would have in the championship game. I think that there's at least 3 teams that could possibly find themselves in the championship game easily. I think Yelm is definitely one of them. They're much more than Braden Platt. They've got a ton of guys, and they are very much major contender in my eyes to repeat as champions. Bellevue played them tough already last year, Devin, in the playoffs in the semifinals. It was a 28-27, I think. And, Bellevue being another year older with a team that, was primarily underclassmen last year, really gives me a lot of confidence in picking them, especially with the schedule that they played last year. They went right down to the wire, I think, with Central Catholic of Oregon, or was it Centennial of Oregon? I can't remember which one it was, but they're very much in the conversation. And then, I also really like O'Day, where you're coming from there, Tyson. With the running back room that they have, and then the defensive line play that they have as well, I think that they're a major, major problem for everybody. Can they beat a team like Yelm? Yes. But they're going to have to go through a more rigorous schedule to get there. And, you wonder how they're going to hold up throughout the season. So I really struggle going with those three teams, but I feel pretty good in picking Yelm against Bellevue. I agree with that pick of who it's going to be. And I think that Yelm is going to end up winning another championship because I think Brayton Platt is him. I think he's just that good of a player. He could do just about anything that you need him to do at any one given moment. And it turns out that actually last year it was, Kyler Ronquillo that ends up making the big play. But, they throw around that term a bunch of dogs in Yelm. And, they really have bought in as a program and as a community. So I'm going to go with Yelm in that regard, and I think it's going to be 28-24.
I could totally see it that way, too, because the kid we didn't even mention that Yelm has is that Zay Patterson, who
he's
I think played it. Yeah, he played at like 195 or something I read last year, and now he's up to 235, and he feels just as fast, if not faster than he did, but committed to UCLA. And if there's anybody equipped to stop the running game of O'Day, it's Yelm, just from those two linebackers alone.
Yeah, I think Bellevue could win it though. I really do. It's so hard to pick. I think in 3A. That's why we let off with it. I think it's super deep, and all four teams that you get in the semis and beyond are going to be super tough. And we're completely overlooking like Eastside Catholic right here in this conversation. They're very much another team that consistently reloads with talent and players. And, they had an undefeated season last year and had the lead and could have been state champions, so, had the ball in their hands.
Yeah, totally. Eastside Catholic is no slouch.
Dimitri Manning, 6'8", 340, says Lucas. That's a big man, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Lucas is lucky to have him in front of him.
Oh my god.
Yeah. No kidding. That's a blindside protector.
He eats small children for dinner. Holy
that's like Zach. That's like the biggest lineman we've seen since like Zach Banner. Speaking of an O'Day player.
Dimitri moves really well too. Like
looks light on his feet.
Yeah.
He'll be in the NFL one day.
Oh, yeah.
All right. 4A. I don't know. Who starts? I'm not starting. I started.
I'll lead off. I can make this one quick. Graham Kapowson, Emerald Ridge. Graham Kapowson's overall weaponry outweighs Emerald Ridge is gutsy passing attack, 34-28.
I have the same championship, but I got Emerald Ridge winning. I think Dixon adds a lot. I think he's going to add a lot more because, Jake has all of his targets back, so I think just adding him elevates it even more. I got them over GK 27-24.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a clean sweep on the pick. I definitely think Graham Kapowson is going to be in the championship game. And I also agree with Emerald Ridge being in the championship game. I think that the quarterback play is incredible, and the wide receiver weapons that they have on both sides is also equally incredible. But I'm going with Emerald Ridge in this one. I think Emerald Ridge has just enough to win it, 31-27. Very close game.
I like it.
Yeah. So, and for what it's worth, I think Graham Kapowson is very, very, very much, deserving of being the favorite. And they're going to end up probably playing twice this year. And it wouldn't be shocking to me if they split. I think that they're going to be very good against one another, and whoever wins the regular season game could possibly go undefeated, although we are overlooking Sumner. We are overlooking Puyallup as some teams that could maybe trip them up depending on matchups. We saw it last year. That the league is built for, somebody to beat somebody that they probably shouldn't on paper. It's just the way that the league plays out. So it wouldn't be shocking to me. I don't think either of them are going to be really undefeated though, getting into the championship game. I think that they might each play each other with like one loss under their belt.
Yeah, I could see that, and I could very well see Lake Stevens sneaking by either one of them too. But no, that league is superior, and I think even more so this year than last year. That both of those teams are definitely going to elevate themselves towards the top, and you'll see teams like Puyallup and Sumner and Curtis and Bethel kind of battle it out for third.
Yeah, quite a few teams from that league end up getting crossover matchups. So, anything can happen once you get to that point. But yeah, I think that Lake Stevens is still a competitor. I think that they're in good position. I think Kennedy Catholic, like I talked earlier, team that's outside of your top 10 for some reason, is realistically got a shot to get back to the semifinal round. And then Matt threw in Kamayakan. So we should keep our eye on Kamayakan and, maybe a team that comes out of the MCC. And it seems like there's always a team from over on that side of the pass that, gives everybody a good run for their money. One team that we haven't talked about that has had a couple of good seasons that just hasn't really, I think they won the championship maybe a couple years back. I could be wrong, but is Gonzaga Prep? We're not really talking too much about Gonzaga Prep.
Yeah, graduated quite a few guys last year, to my knowledge, but the sophomore running back they had running the ball last year, he runs like Braden Platt. Like he could run anybody over. His name, I can't recall his name, but overall it's supposed to be generally a pretty down year for that league, I think, in comparison to years past, but you never know. I mean, they have a smaller school than most at the 4A level. So they don't draw from as many kids, but they're going to be they'll definitely win their league, and they'll probably be in the final 8 teams, I would assume.
No picks for Moses Lake there, huh?
I can't go out on that far. I mean, they're a dark horse to get into the playoffs. They're kind of like my Meade last year. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was on Meade's train early, and obviously they ran into Bellevue. First playoff game, and it was a no contest in that realm, but they just have plenty. I mean, you start diving through their roster, and they've got plenty of weapons to get there and make some noise, where may have not been on teams' radars the last few seasons.
Yeah, a lot of teams can say that they ran into Bellevue.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we ran into Linden, it just didn't go our way, Yeah, no, but all right. I think that we did pretty good ultimately. First time talking some football in quite a while and getting to know some of these newer players this year that we haven't had a chance to really see yet on film. There's always some guys that transfer in from out of the area, or some guys that really hit the weight room in the off season and come back 10, 15, 20 pounds heavier and, just as quick, just as fast, but stronger. And, I'm sure we're going to get to know a few players that, we don't have their names written down right now. And there's also going to probably be some teams that, come out and show us that we should be talking about them a little bit more. So I'm really excited for, what we got coming up here in the next week and a half or so. And it was really fun to get together with you guys and talk some shop again.
Yeah. Should we give a teaser to what next week's interview might be?
Yeah. I don't know about much of a surprise, really. I mean, we're going to definitely try to get some coaches on here to talk to one another. A big game in week 1 between 2A and 3A opponents. And we're going to peer pressure Coach Sampson of Rainier Beach and Coach Cooper of Highline to see if they can come on here on video and talk so nicely about each other and the programs. And, maybe we can get some good bulletin board material from each one of them. And I'd love to get I'd love to get Coach Cooper on here telling us, how, his team's being overlooked and disrespected because, I'm not sure. I'm pretty positive that he would think that, his squad is going to have a good chance to win state. None of us picked Highline in our championship game. So, I mean, he's going to definitely come in here and probably want to give us the 4-1-1. So
he probably bookmarked my rankings.
I'll blame him.
It's probably up on the bulletin board. Hey, at least I had him in the top 10. SB Live did their top 6 teams to win the championship, and they didn't list Highline. And I noticed he took that one. He took that one for bulletin board proof too. So I won't be the only culprit.
I like what they do with, trying to name like the top teams that you think are going to win, but 6 is such an arbitrary number. Like, where you come up with 6 teams that you think are going to win, it's like,
yeah,
it's like, I don't know. Like, that's like saying 10 teams can win or 12 teams can win, It's like, yeah, anybody can win. It's, it's like try to narrow it down a little bit here. I mean, anybody can win, right? I mean, anything can happen. Guys can get injured. It's high school sports, Yeah. There could be an incident where somebody gets suspended, a team has to forfeit a game, you never know what's going to happen at this level. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm happy that, SB Live Washington does their thing. And, I'm also happy that the Tacoma News Tribune does their thing and everybody around the state, because, it helps make it easy for everybody to get the exposure and, keep everybody informed. And I think the state of Washington does a phenomenal job in the media presence that it has. And, it's fun to talk about all the teams that they get a chance to see. And I'd love to invite some people on the show. And if they want to jump on and talk about the teams that they cover in their area and tell us why we're wrong or why we're right, I'm very much open to it and would love to have everybody. So that's a formal, informal invite.
Yep. And I posted a link today. I mean, you can send it to any 3 of us. I think Nick's email is on there, and Devin's probably, I think he's got his attached to his page too, but we want to do a little top plays. So as the season gets rolling, if you kids are making huddle highlights, send them to us. We'd love to show
top 5.
Totally. Be a blast.
Yeah. I want to
look forward to next week.
I want to see Lucas Resort's 64-yard hose.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, all we need is the file, basically. So if you could send that in an email, or whether we need to make a Dropbox or something, we'll explore that when we get to it.
Yeah, and we want your very friendly hate mail as well. So make sure we're gonna read it. We're gonna read it out loud for everybody. You guys absolutely suck. But yeah, shout out to the Moses Lake crowd. I'm sure they're very happy tonight. So hopefully everything goes well in Moses Lake for the next couple of weeks. But all right, so before I get out of here real quick, I just want to let everybody know who's watching. Saving the announcement for the end. It's like the last season that everybody watched the N2 Media live stream broadcast. We were on a platform called Uscreen. It was a subscription based where you paid $4 a month or $1 to watch a game. Happy to announce that this year we're going to go back to just doing our games for free for everybody to watch on Facebook and YouTube. So look forward to having more people tune into the games this year, and everyone can save their money. And we're going to have some businesses, sponsor our events, and we're going to bore you with commercial breaks. So, yeah, it'll be fun to have everybody with and that collab cam, Tyson, that we figured out how to use on that other software. Yeah, I've been thinking about some ways on how we could use that. Like, I could have somebody down on the sideline with their cell phone, and we can do some live interviews, halftime, going into the locker room or something like that. Have a coach yell at us and say, "No, we're losing by 30."
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. On that note, everybody follow Nick's YouTube page if you aren't already. At N2 Media, subscribe. Devin is Devin at Devin Record on Twitter.
Yep.
And I am at Recruit Radar PNW. We appreciate you guys.
All right, guys. So next week it's going to be probably Monday again, maybe Sunday. Either way, we'll get the word out quickly. We're going to try to make arrangements to see if we can get Coach Cooper and Coach Sampson on to talk about their week 1 showdown in non-league 2A, 3A action. We're going to talk about some games of the week in each classification. And next week is just going to be more of a focus on individual games in week 1 overall. Should be a little bit faster of a show because we don't have so much to get to. We're just going to pick a few games to talk about in each classification, maybe each league and such. So appreciate everybody coming on here and checking out the live stream. Again, subscribe to all of our platforms so you can be annoyed by us 24/7, 365, 7-Eleven like Logan Sloman. All right. Anything else from you guys before we check out for the evening?
Nope.
Nope.
All
Excited
right.
for the year.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Take it easy.